Chapter 1. The Village by the Forest. Second Fool opened his eyes and stared at the mud and thatch roof over his head. The quilt covering his body was a deep yellow color and had a musty smell. It was so old that its original color could no longer be distinguished. Next to him lay his second brother, Hanju, who appeared to be in a deep slumber. Snores intermittently floated over as he slept. 5 feet from the bed was an earthen wall that had suffered from numerous cracks due to the passage of time. From the other side of the wall came the nagging voice of his mother and the occasional deep breathing of his father, who was smoking his pipe. Second Fool slowly closed his eyes, trying to force himself to sleep. He knew that if he didn't go to sleep now, he wouldn't be able to wake up early the next day. If he woke up late, he would not be able to go up to the mountains with his good friends to gather firewood. Second Fool's real name was Han Li. This elegant name was not given to him by his parents. When he was born, his parents had offered 2 pieces of cornbread to the village's elder Zhang in exchange for giving the baby Han Li a second name. TL, Second Fool, Ling Zai Chinese letter in Mandarin has a pleasing sound despite its meaning. When Uncle Zhang was young, he had attended school with the wealthy children in the city. As he was the only one in the village who knew how to read a few words, more than half of the children in the village were named by him. Han Li was called Second Fool by those in the village. Despite his name, he wasn't stupid-looking or foolish. On the contrary, he was actually the smartest person in the village. But just like the other children, aside from when they were home, nobody called him by his official name, Han Li. Instead, they called him by his pet name, Second Fool. The reason why he was nicknamed Second Fool was due to the fact that there was already someone named Fool in the village. This type of nickname was nothing. There were children in the village named Doggy and Dumb Egg. These names weren't nearly as pleasant sounding as Second Fool. Because of this, Han Li felt some consolation even though he was not very fond of his nickname. Physically, Han Li was very ordinary. He was tan and matched the generic descriptions of a child born in a farming community. Deep in his heart, however, he had matured faster than others of the same age. Ever since he was young, he had yearned that one day he would be able to leave his small village and explore the fertile lands of the outside world that Uncle Zhang had always talked about. Han Li had never dared to speak of his dreams to anyone else in the village because they would be deeply shocked. After all, leaving this place was a notion that even adults didn't easily think about, let alone a small child. Children around his age only knew how to chase chickens and pet dogs. They had never entertained the strange notion of leaving the village. Han Li's family had a total of 7 members, including 2 older brothers, 1 older sister, and 1 younger sister. He was the 4th eldest in his family and turned 10 this year. Together, they lived a hard yet honest lifestyle. Very rarely did they get to eat meat and fish, but the entire family was content with living with the meager resources they had. At this moment, Han Li was hovering between the state of sleep and consciousness. As he slowly drifted to sleep, only one thought was on his mind. While in the mountains, he had to pick more red berries for his younger sister whom he doted on the most. The next morning at noon, Han Li was shielding himself from the scorching sun overhead in the shade casted by the pile of lumber on his back. Wrapped around his chest was a pouch filled to the brim with red berries that bounced with each step as he walked home. He had no idea that at this moment, there was a guest in his home, a guest that would change his destiny forever. This guest was actually someone who had very close blood ties with Han Li. It was his 3rd uncle. It was rumored that his 3rd uncle was the shopkeeper of a restaurant in the nearby city. According to his parents, 3rd uncle was the most capable within their family. After a few hundred years, the Han family had finally produced someone like his 3rd uncle, a figure with status and respect that was unrivaled within the family. When Han Li was young, he had only met his 3rd uncle a few times. Han Li's older brother became a blacksmith's apprentice in the city thanks to 3rd uncle's introduction. Every so often, this 3rd uncle would even gift some food to his parents to bring home and eat. Because he had looked after Han Li's family with great consideration, Han Li had a very good impression of him. Even though his parents never said anything, he knew that in their hearts they were very grateful. Han Li's eldest brother was the family's pride and joy. As an apprentice of a blacksmith, he was able to bring home 30 copper coins every month, minus living expenses. And when he finally graduated from his apprenticeship, he would earn even more money. Every time his parents talked about their eldest son, their spirits would soar with pride. Although Han Li was young, he was tremendously envious. The best work he could find was to be the apprentice of a craft master and rely on the crafts he made to earn money. So when Han Li saw the brand new satin robes and the round face that belonged to his third uncle, Han Li was overjoyed. Setting down the firewood in a corner outside of the house, he went to the front of the house to greet his third uncle. "Third uncle, Han Li greets you." After doing so, he obediently stood by the side and listened to his third uncle chat with his parents. Third uncle beamed at Han Li as he opened his mouth, praising his nephew. "What a sensible child." After complimenting Han Li, he turned his attention back to Han Li's parents and explained the reason for his visit. Although Han Li wasn't able to fully understand the words his third uncle was saying as he was too young, he still roughly understood what he said. It turned out his third uncle's restaurant had the backing of the Seven Mysteries Sect. This sect was divided into the inner and outer divisions. Not too long ago, third uncle had been officially recognized as an outer disciple. That meant that he could bring a child between the ages of 7 and 12 to take the inner disciple examinations. Once every 5 years, the Seven Mysteries Sect would formally issue invitations for youngsters to take the test to become inner disciples. The test would officially begin the following month. Third uncle was a smart and astute man who was childless, so he naturally thought of Han Li, who met the age requirement. The moment the usually docile father Han heard the words Jiang Hu and sect, along with many other phrases he had never heard before, he felt very hesitant. Bringing his smoking pipe to his lips and giving it a puff, he sat down without saying a word. TL, Father Han, is the title of Han Li's father. According to third uncle, the Seven Mysteries Sect could be considered one of the best sects within several hundred miles. If one were to become an inner disciple, not only would one be able to practice martial arts for free, one would also receive a monthly allowance and have his needs taken care of. Not only that, those who didn't pass the inner disciple examinations could still enter the sect's outer division and become an outer disciple like third uncle. They would still have the opportunity to help the Seven Mysteries Sect handle its external affairs. Upon hearing the possibility that his son could receive a monthly allowance and even become as successful as his third uncle, Han Li's father finally decided to give his approval. After getting the approval from Han Li's father, third uncle felt elation in his heart. Leaving behind 2 silver coins, he said that he would return in a month to escort Han Li to the testing area. During this period of time, Han Li's father had to ensure that Han Li was clothed and well fed to improve his constitution so that it would be easier for Han Li to pass the test. After giving these instructions, third uncle bid farewell to Han Li and his father, patted Han Li on his head and left for the city. While Han Li didn't fully comprehend his third uncle's words, he could understand that he would be able to earn money in the big city. It seemed that his dream from before was going to come true, making him so excited that he could not sleep for the first few nights. After 1 month had passed, third uncle returned to the village, escorting Han Li to the testing site. Before he left, Han Li's father repeatedly instructed Han Li on the ways of proper behavior. One must be honest, have the capacity to endure, and avoid unnecessary conflicts with others. Meanwhile, Han Li's mother urged him to take care of his health and to eat and sleep well. The day finally arrived, and third uncle came to take Han Li away by carriage. As his parents gradually disappeared from his sight, Han Li bit down on his lips in order to prevent his tears from flowing down his eyes. Although he had always been more mature than other children of the same age, he was still a 10-year-old child. This was the first time he had left home, so he naturally felt depressed. A homesickness developed in his heart. He was determined to rush home after he struck rich, never to be separated from his parents. Han Li would never have thought that from this moment on, money would lose any meaning to him. He was unexpectedly going to walk a path different from ordinary mortals. Instead, he was going to walk down his own path towards immortal cultivation. Han Li's home was said to be a small city, but it was actually just a large village called Green Ox Village. Only those who lived in the mountainous region, and the natives with no knowledge of the outside world called the village Green Ox City. The only reason why Han Li knew about this was because he had been informed by his uncle Zhang, who had been working as a gatekeeper for more than 10 years. Green Ox Village wasn't very large. It only had one main road, known as Green Ox Street, which spanned from the eastern to the western borders of the village. There was also only one tavern in village, located on its western border. For any traveling merchant that didn't want to sleep outdoors, this tavern was the only option. There was only one road for carriages in the western part of Green Ox Village. It ran from the gates of the village and the Green Ox Tavern all the way to the Spring Fragrance restaurant. the only other place anyone would visit besides the tavern. Spring Fragrance Restaurant wasn't big by any means and was actually quite old-fashioned. However, this establishment had a certain charm that was appealing to many travelers. Every day at noon, there would always be a crowd of people, making the place constantly swamped. A bearded man with a round face emerged from a carriage along with a dark-skinned, rotund little boy who looked to be around 10 years old. They both walked into the restaurant with a swagger. All of the regular customers knew who this man was. He was the manager of this restaurant, Fatty Han. The boy, however, was not someone they were familiar with. "Elder Han, this tan little boy resembles you a lot. Could it be a child from a prostitute you spent the night with?" someone joked. The moment the joke was uttered, the entire restaurant roared with laughter. "Pay, this is the son of my blood brother, my own nephew. Of course he'll look like me," Fatty Han said proudly instead of being angered. This duo had traveled for 3 whole days without rest before arriving at the village. They were Han Li and his third uncle, who was known as Fatty Han by the village people. Fatty Han greeted a few regulars before bringing Han Li to the back of the restaurant and entered a remote courtyard. "Xiao Li, you should rest here for a while. When the time comes for the inner disciple examinations, I'll call you. For now, I must leave in order to attend to a few regulars." Fatty Han pointed at a side room in the courtyard and kindly motioned for Han Li to enter it. Xiao in this context means little. After saying that, Han Li's third uncle turned around and hurried back inside the restaurant to tend to his customers. As he reached the door, he felt a sudden unease in his heart and reminded Han Li, "Don't run about. You might get lost in the village if you wander around, so it's best if you don't leave this courtyard." And, hearing Han Li's honest response, he nodded in relief and walked out the door. After his third uncle left the courtyard, Han Li suddenly felt exhausted. The moment his head landed on his pillow, he fell into a deep sleep and began snoring, surprisingly without the fear of a normal kid staying alone in unfamiliar surroundings. When the night came, a servant came by with some food. Although it wasn't a lavish meal, it was still delicious. After Han Li ate the food, the servant was clearing away the remaining dishes when his third uncle leisurely walked in. "How was it? Was the meal suitable to your taste? Do you miss home?" "Yes, I miss home," Han Li replied in his childish voice. Third uncle seemed satisfied with Han Li's response. He began to talk to him about his daily life and bragged about many of his experiences. Gradually, Han Li became less shy and started to laugh and talk with his third uncle. In this manner, 2 days quickly passed. On the third day, after Han Li finished dinner, he was waiting for his uncle's stories of Jianghu when a carriage stopped in front of the restaurant door. Jianghu, World of Martial Artists. This carriage was painted a shiny black color, and even the horse was a rarely seen golden steed. But what attracted the most attention was that on the frame of the carriage was the word "mystery," written in silver characters in the middle of a red triangle emblazing a black banner. The image on the banner also emitted an unfathomable air. Seeing this banner, every martial arts expert in the area knew that this carriage belonged to one of the 2 local overlords in the area, the Seven Mysteries Sect. It seemed that an esteemed guest had arrived in Green Ox Village. Seven Mysteries Sect was previously known as the Seven Supreme Sect. 200 years ago, the sect was established by an extremely famous martial master named Sovereign of the Seven Supreme. Having once swept across and dominated the Jing province and the nearby Shu province for a few decades, the Sovereign of the Seven Supreme was resoundingly famous. But after he was afflicted with illness, the power of the Seven Mysteries Sect took a devastating hit, and its influence dropped drastically. In the end, the Seven Mysteries Sect was forced out of the main city of the Jing province by the combined efforts of its rival sects. 100 years ago, the sect was forced to relocate to an extremely remote area called the Celestial Rainbow Mountain. From then on, they rebuilt their roots in that third-rate region and became a local powerhouse. Locally, the only other power that could rival the Seven Mysteries Sect was the Feral Wolf Gang. The Feral Wolf Gang was originally a gang of horse-mounted bandits from the Jing province that had no qualms about burning, killing, looting, and pillaging. After a while, an army dispatched by the imperial court encircled and fiercely suppressed the bandits. Some of the bandits accepted the amnesty granted to them by the imperial court, while the remaining bandits reformed themselves into the Feral Wolf Gang. The Feral Wolf Gang was exceedingly cruel and bloodthirsty, retaining their former characteristics of having no qualms about committing atrocities. Thus, whenever they clashed, the Seven Mysteries Sect was always at a disadvantage. Even though the Feral Wolf Gang controlled more villages than the Seven Mysteries Sect, the gang didn't know how to manage the villages effectively to run businesses and generate income. In comparison, the wealth of the villages controlled by the Seven Mysteries Sect vastly outstripped the villages under Feral Wolf Gang's control. Jealous of the Seven Mysteries Sect's prosperity, the Feral Wolf Gang made plans to take over the sect's territory, resulting in the long-standing conflict between the two major powers. The conflict gave the current sect leader of the Seven Mysteries Sect endless headaches. Because of the Feral Wolf Gang, the Seven Mysteries Sect have been accepting an increasing number of disciples in recent years. After the carriage stopped, a skinny 40-year-old man jumped down. His movements were extremely nimble, indicating that he was a powerful expert. He seemed to be very familiar with Fatty Han's restaurant and walked pompously towards the room Han Li was residing in. Upon seeing the 40-year-old man, Fatty Han immediately greeted him respectfully. "Protector Wang, why has an esteemed person such as yourself personally made the trip?" "Humph," Protector Wang coldly snorted. "The roads here haven't been peaceful lately. Because of this, there's a need to strengthen the defenses. Thus, the elders ordered that I personally come. Don't speak any more rubbish. Is this the child you wanted to nominate?" Yes, this is my nephew. I hope that Protector Wang will take care of him." Looking at the impatient look on Protector Wang's face, third uncle immediately retrieved a heavy-looking pouch and secretly passed it over to Protector Wang. After he assessed the weight of the pouch, Protector Wang's impatient demeanor visibly relaxed. "Fatty Han, you truly know how to conduct yourself. On the way back, I will make sure that all of your nephew's needs are well cared for. Anyways, it is getting pretty late now. We had best hurry on our way." Chapter 3: Seven Mysteries Sect. The smell inside the carriage was unpleasant, but this could hardly be surprising. The optimal capacity for this carriage was only 10 people, but currently there were about 30 young children squeezed into the carriage. Even if young children had smaller bodies than adults, the space inside the carriage was intolerably cramped. The clever Han Li had chosen a seat near to the sides when he had first entered the carriage, and was now stealthily observing the other children. The children who had registered or been nominated to take the test at the Seven Mysteries Sect could be segregated into 3 different groups based on their clothing and bearing. In the first group, there was a youth wearing silk clothing seated in the center of the carriage, surrounded by the majority of the children. This youth's name was Wu Yan. He was 13 years old, one of the oldest children to be seated inside the carriage. Normally, he would not be even here since his age had already exceeded the age limit, but one of his older female cousins was married to someone of authority inside the Seven Mysteries Sect. Therefore, Wu Yan's age was purposely overlooked, and he was allowed to join the selection. Wu Yan's family ran a martial arts dojo, so he had access to a considerable amount of wealth. From a young age, he had practiced external martial arts. Even though his talent could not be considered excellent, when facing against Han Li's type, those children who had never practiced martial arts before, it was more than enough for Wu Yan to trample them underfoot. It was very clear that children like Wu Yan, who came from powerful wealthy families and had previously practiced martial arts, could be considered the elite within the group of children inside the carriage. They were from different backgrounds. Some came from the families of shopkeepers, some came from the families of workers or families of craftsmen, etc. However, they all had one special thing in common: they grew up in the city. Thus, from an early age, they had learned from the elders of their families on how to observe people and know what was beneficial for them. Because of this, these people surrounded Wu Yan and repeatedly called out "Young Master Wu" and "Big Brother Wu" to curry favor. Wu Yan seemed to be used to being fawned over. The third group of people were people like Han Li. This group came from remote and poor villages. They usually made do with what they had, were poor, and had suffered a life of hardship and strife. Only 5 to 6 people belonged to this third group, creating a minority inside the carriage. They usually kept to themselves and had a quiet demeanor, not even daring to speak or laugh loudly. They were a refreshing change when compared to those loud children. After the horse carriage exited Green Ox Town, it sped westward and made a few detours to visit other locations and collect even more children. On the 5th day, they managed to arrive at the celestial Rainbow Mountain, the home of the Seven Mysteries Sect, near sundown. The first thing the children saw after exiting the carriage was the beautiful, captivating sunset. It was only when Protector Wang started to rally the children that they woke up from their daze and continued proceeding forward. Celestial Rainbow Mountain was originally Setting Wind Mountain. Legend has it that during ancient times, a 5-colored wind blew past this location, instantly transforming the mountain. After this place was discovered by humans, they realized how beautiful the sunset looked behind the rosy pink clouds. Inspired by the majestic image, the humans decided to rename this place Celestial Rainbow Mountain. The Celestial Rainbow Mountain was the second largest mountain in the Jing province after the Bai Mang Mountain. It was extremely spacious, spanning a radius of 10 li. The Celestial Rainbow Mountain was actually a mountain range consisting of 10 mountain peaks, each of them being incredibly dangerous, and under the control of the various divisions of the Seven Mysteries Sect. The main mountain peak of the Celestial Rainbow Mountain was named the Setting Sun Summit. It was treacherous and dangerous beyond comparison. Not only was it extremely steep, there was only a single path between the peak and base of the mountain. After the Seven Mysteries Sect rebuilt their roots in this area, they set up a total of 13 checkpoints on the path up the mountain. Some of these checkpoints were hidden while others were out in the open. They were prepared for every single route that the feral wolf gang might use to invade the mountain. As Han Li followed the escorts in front of the group, he surveyed his nearby surroundings. Suddenly, the escort stopped as waves of friendly and amicable voices rang out. "Little brother Wang, why did you arrive so late? You're 2 days late." "Division Head Yue, we were delayed by the journey here. Sorry for causing you to worry." Standing in front of all the children, Protector Wang replied respectfully as he bowed to a red-faced old man. Protector Wang's stern facade was instantly replaced by a look of fawning. "Which batch of children is this?" "This is the batch number 17. This division head Yue pompously looked towards Han Li and the other children. "Send them to the courtyard, let them rest for tonight. Tomorrow morning, we'll begin the selection process. Send those who fail or break the rules back down the mountain." "Understood, Division Head Yue." Walking atop of the mountain's stone steps, the children were tremendously excited, but no one dared to speak loudly. Despite their young age, the children somehow knew that this place would determine their destiny. Protector Wang was in the lead and greeted several figures on the way to the children's sleeping quarters. It could be seen that he was familiar with a lot of people and was quite popular in the region. The majority of the people they met on their way were all wearing green clothes and equipped with a blade or sword. Even those that appeared empty-handed wore pouches full of mysterious items around their waists. From their bearing and conduct, one could tell that all of these people were somewhat proficient at martial arts. Han Li and the rest of the children were brought to a mountain peak that seemed lower in height in comparison to the other mountain peaks. On the summit, there was a house made of mud, built for the children to sleep in during the night. As he slept, Han Li dreamed that he was wearing silk, had a golden sword in his hands, and possessed peerless martial arts, soundly beating the village blacksmith's sons who he previously were no match for. Then he woke on second morning, still reminiscent of his dream. Protector Wang did not let the children enjoy breakfast. Instead, he brought all of the children down the mountain to a steep slope containing many bamboo shoots. There, Division Head Yue and a few other youths whom Han Li didn't recognize were already waiting for them. Chapter 4, Bone Refining Cliff. In front of the children, Division Head Yue hollered, "Everyone, listen well. Inside the bamboo forest, there's a small path on which you'll proceed forward where you will eventually reach the bone refining cliff of the Seven Mysteries Sect. The first area of the path will be the bamboo forest. The second area will be a rocky slope region. The last area will be the cliff. Only those who have managed to climb the bone refining cliff by noon will be disciples of our Seven Mysteries Sect. If you finish after noon, although you won't become an inner disciple, you can still become an unofficial disciple as long as your performance demonstrates remarkable prowess." Han Li naturally did not understand what it meant to be an unofficial disciple. He only knew that all he had to do was to climb the cliff. Casting his gaze forward at the uneven, steep slope, he saw many lengthy bamboo shoots sprawled across the surface of the cliff. Seeing this, it seemed that the first obstacle should be pretty easy. Studying the other children, Han Li was unwilling to lose to those in his age group. The atmosphere quickly became tense for the other children as well. Division Head Yue cast a glance at the rising sun and said, "Okay, it's almost time, prepare to set off. Don't be afraid, your seniors will be protecting you from behind in case there's any danger." Han Li turned his head and glanced at those unrecognizable youths. These people were the senior disciples, so they should be from an earlier batch. Han Li could not help but think, how impressive if I managed to join them, could I wear the same robes of an inner disciple. As he was blindly pondering, Han Li discovered that the other children had already rushed into the bamboo forest. Seeing that he was left behind, Han Li quickly started moving forward. Once the 30 children rushed in, They stopped moving as a group and scattered within the spacious bamboo forest. Behind Han Li was a lanky senior disciple with a cold look on his face, silently following Han Li. Han Li was a bit fearful, but he did not dare to start a conversation and waste time. Slightly intimidated, he lowered his body and proceeded to tread on the steep slope. This stretch of bamboo forest looked ordinary on the outside, but after Han Li walked for a distance, he found that it was slowly becoming more and more difficult to move forward. His footsteps got heavier, and gradually, Han Li began to use one hand to pull the bamboo shoots, using the momentum of the bamboo springing back to its original position to propel him forward. Han Li persisted in this manner for quite some time. At a certain point, he became extremely exhausted, so he had no choice but to find an empty space to sit down and rest, his breath leaving him in heavy bursts of air. After taking a breather, Han Li turned his gaze and saw the lanky senior behind him. Although the ground was very steep, this senior disciple was standing nonchalantly on the ground as if this was nothing to him. His body was totally devoid of dirt, standing erect like the bamboo shoots nearby, while he silently looked at Han Li in the distance. Looking at the cold glance of this senior, Han Li felt fear in his heart and rapidly turned his head back. He also heard sounds of heavy breathing in front and deduced that one of the faster children was also making use of this opportunity to rest. After a short break, Han Li swiftly resumed his journey. The slope was perilously steep, and Han Li's energy reserve got smaller and smaller. He decided to lie flat on the ground and claw his way forward instead of walking on his legs, such that if he exhausted his energy, he would not fall flat on his face. Luckily, his clothes were made of strong materials. If not, his limbs and knees might have been damaged by being dragged across the rocky ground. As he almost reached the end of the bamboo forest, Han Li felt that it was very tough to complete the last few steps. This was because, as the stones and rocks on the ground increased, the number of bamboo shoots decreased. Han Li finally reached the point where there were no more bamboo shoots for him to use for support. Han Li slowly moved inch by inch past this last stretch of road and overcame the first obstacle. The moment he walked out of the bamboo forest, he could only see a vast expanse of land. In front of him was an incomparably huge, rocky mountain. On top of the gargantuan mountain were a few skinny kids, slowly climbing up the stone cliff along with a few senior disciples keeping a close watch on them. Han Li did not dare to hesitate any longer and rushed to make his way to the front of the huge rocky mountain. The mountain consisted of layers and layers of sedimentary rocks stacked upon each other and appeared very eroded. In some places, the ground crumbled when touched. Of course, there were also solid slabs of broken stone, but finding them was extremely perilous as they would lead to injury. Han Li had only practiced the most rudimentary of martial arts, and as such, his hands were already filled with injuries after his trek through the bamboo forest. At the same time, his clothes were torn and tattered around his knees, and the flesh and muscles hidden by his clothing were also scraped and injured. Although the wound on his knee was small, Han Li gritted his teeth every time it came into contact with the jagged rocks, the pain almost more than he could bear. The few children in the lead had already climbed the furthest. Seeing the others ahead of him, Han Li refused to give up. The moment any thoughts of giving up flashed past his mind, images of his third uncle and his family would appear, giving him the motivation to carry on. With the memories of those he loved urging him to continue, Han Li relentlessly proceeded forward. Before Han Li left for the inner disciple examination, Han Li's father and third uncle reminded Han Li that the test would be extremely tough. If he did not persevere to the end, Han Li would have no chances of joining the Seven Mysteries Sect. At this moment, Han Li no longer cared about joining the sect. Instead, the only source of motivation pushing him forward was an unwillingness to give in and the urgency to catch up to the others in the lead. Han Li raised his head and noticed that Wu Yan was currently in the lead. Wu Yan was older than Han Li and had even practiced martial arts. Unsurprisingly, he had a stronger body compared to the others. Once again, Han Li turned his gaze backwards and saw that he had surpassed quite a few children, many of which were still rushing forward. Sucking in a deep breath, Han Li increased the speed of his ascent. Despite exhausting the majority of his strength, he still hadn't shortened the distance between him and those in the lead. As the unyielding sun climbed towards the center of the sky, Han Li's body got heavier and heavier, making it harder for him to reach the summit. In the meantime, Wu Yan had already reached the top of the huge mountain. Near the summit of the 100-meter-tall mountain was the incredibly steep bone refining cliff. Over 10 ropes, each with knots the size of a fist, hung from the top of the cliff. Wu Yan selected one and began to climb up the cliff. Han Li gazed over at Wu Yan, who was in the lead, and felt resigned in his heart. He knew that he could not catch up to those in front in the short amount of time left until noon. The notion of failing was quickly erased by the sudden pain that flared up from his injuries. The waves of fiery pain sapped the strength from his limbs. Feeling his body fall downward, Han Li frantically grasped a stone with one hand. His heart was beating erratically as he rapidly pasted his body onto the side of the mountain, not daring to make any sudden motions. After a moment, he calmed down, using his hand to test the strength of the stone slab. Only after he determined it was secured in place did he manage to let go of his worries. Looking downwards, Han Li saw that the lanky senior was in a half-squatting position with his arms extended out, preparing to catch Han Li if he fell. Seeing that Han Li was safe, however, the senior retracted his arms. Han Li felt relief in his heart. If he really fell down the cliff, all of his efforts would have been wasted. After a short moment, he slowly inched forward and crawled towards the remaining ropes hanging down the bone-refining cliff. Finally, he arrived at the bottom of a rope. The sun had almost reached the center of the sky, indicating that there was only 1 hour before the time limit was up. At this moment, Wu Yan had already ascended the cliff and he turned his head to gaze at the remaining children. Just as Han Li was climbing the rope, his gaze coincidentally met Wu Yan, only to see him giving a thumbs-down gesture to the slower competitors. After laughing maniacally, Wu Yan continued onward. With anger rising in his heart, Han Li grabbed a hold of the rope and began to climb. However, Han Li had long since used up all his energy. Currently, even holding the rope tightly was a challenge for him, let alone climbing the rope. Miraculously, Han Li climbed up to the first knot on his rope. Sitting on it, he felt as if his body had turned into cotton, unable to move a single finger. He turned his head and looked at all the children behind him. Some of them had already given up, sitting down on the stone mountain and breathing heavily. Like Han Li, they had exhausted all of their strength and were on the verge of collapse. Han Li could only bitterly smile. He had greatly underestimated this test. Fortunately, he wasn't among the last of the children. After looking at the senior disciples' cold gazes, he decided to carry on. Even though he had no chances of completing the test before noon, finishing late was better than hanging limp on a rope. Han Li extended both of his stiff hands and used the strength he had recovered during his break to slowly climb up the rope. But at this moment, Han Li's hands stopped responding to his will. He even lacked the strength to maintain a grip on the rope. Han Li paused there and lingered for a moment before reluctantly deciding to remain there seated on the knot. Chapter 5 Dr. Mo. After a brief moment, Han Li felt a tightening sensation on his waist as his body grew light. His body was suddenly lifted upwards. Turning his head, Han Li saw the lanky senior helping him ascend the cliff. With one hand around Han Li's waist, the senior disciple climbed up the cliff with nimble legs. Han Li could not help but notice that the sun had already reached the center of the skies. It was noon. So I failed the test after all. Han Li felt depression set in his heart. It seemed unfair. Even though he had desperately pushed forward, almost to the point of disregarding his life, why couldn't he compare to the other children? In an instant, the bone-refining cliff appeared before him. There were 6 other children resting on top of the cliff. Out of the 6, only Wu Yan had the strength to have a conversation with a middle-aged old man wearing a dark blue garb. Division Head Yue as well as Protector Wang were also standing near him. They were waiting for the senior disciples to escort the rest of the children up the bone-refining cliff. After all the children had been escorted up the cliff, Division Head Yue stepped forward with a solemn expression on his face as he began to address the kids. This time round, only 7 of you passed. Out of this group, 6 will enter my Bai Duan division and formally become our sect's inner disciples. Division Head Yue spoke slowly at the crowd of children. As for Wu Yan, the first disciple to reach the top of the bone-refining cliff, he performed outstandingly, and as such, will be directly sent to the 7th Supreme Division to learn the sect's secret skills and martial arts. After speaking, Division Head Yue glanced at the old man wearing the dark blue garb. The old man twirled his beard around one hand while nodding in satisfaction at Division Head Yue. As for the others, Division Head Yue contemplated the outcome of the remaining children for a moment before rubbing his chin and saying softly, Zhang Tai and Han Li, although these 2 did not pass the test, they still performed admirably. Their determination will allow them to cope with the pain of practicing martial arts. The 2 of you will be unofficial disciples assigned to an instructor of our sect for the next half year. After half a year, you will be tested again. If you pass, you'll be able to become inner disciples, but if you fail, you will be sent to join the outer disciples. helping the sect handle its external affairs. Han Li stole a glance at the person named Zhang Tai. Like Han Li, Zhang Tai had begun climbing the rope but failed to reach the summit of the bone-refining cliff before midday. "Protector Wang, give the rest of the children some silver coins and send them back to their homes," said Division Head Yue as he gave a cold stare at the children who failed the exam. "Understood." Protector Wang complied with the order, and he led the remainder of the children back down the cliff. "Zhang Jun, Wu Mingrui, the two of you will assist me in sending the rest of these children to the Vice Division Head and Instructor Li." Two senior disciples stepped forward and separated Han Li and the rest into two groups before leading them down the cliff. One of the senior disciples was the lanky senior that had always been behind Han Li. As they were descending the cliff, Han Li could not help but steal a glance at Wu Yan, and discovered that he was still chatting with the old man in a dark blue robe, seemingly without any intent of moving from the spot. "He's different from the rest of you. In the future, he will most likely be a core disciple. Only core disciples are sent to the 7 Supreme Division to train in the sect's secret arts. Once he completes his training at the very least, he will have the rank of a protector." The voice belonged to the long and thin face, who could tell what Han Li was thinking. From his tone, Han Li could hear undisguised hints of envy mixing with jealousy. HMMPH, is Wu Yan just pulling strings and depending on his family's connections? If it wasn't for his older cousin being married to sect leader Ma, how could he be selected as a core disciple with such meager skill? He already surpassed the age limit, but he was still sent to the 7 Supreme Division, the senior said in a freezing tone that was comparable to a cold wind on a winter day. "Zhang Jun, have you gone mad? How dare you gossip about the sect leader's decisions? If this news was spread, both of us could suffer from cruel punishments and end up in dire straits." After hearing Zhang Jun's words, the other senior with the long and thin face felt shock in his heart and rapidly checked his surroundings to make sure no one heard Zhang Jun. Only after discovering that there were no other disciples did he heave a sigh of relief. The senior with the cold countenance snorted as if he were harboring hatred in his heart, but after Wu Mingrui's warning, he stopped talking. Only then did Han Li understand that the senior with the cold countenance was Zhang Jun listening to their conversation. Han Li could roughly understand what they were talking about. Wu Yan entered the 7 Supreme Division, not because of his own skills, but because he had the backing of the sect leader. As they walked along the mountain path, these two seniors both thought of the sect's internal affairs, which filled them with sadness. Lacking the mood to converse, they silently led the children forward. The rest of the children also dared not speak out of turn. Perhaps they were thinking of the differences between the 7 Mysteries Sect and their hometowns. Just as they were passing through a forested region, a 60-year-old man emerged from the woods. He was tall and thin with a yellow tinge to his skin and a head full of white hair. As he approached them, he coughed with every step, causing many of them to worry that he was suffering a great deal and could collapse at any moment. The senior disciples, upon seeing this old man, did not show a trace of worry on their faces. Instead, they respectfully greeted the old man with a bow. "Dr. Mo, this disciple greets you. Is there anything that you need this disciple to handle?" Zhang Jun, unlike his previously cold demeanor, now had an expression full of respect. To Zhang Jun, this old man in front of him was worthy of more respect than division head and even the sect leader. "Oh, is this the latest batch of disciples?" The old man continued coughing and asked with a hoarse voice. "Yes, among the 8 of them, 6 are official inner disciples and 2 are unofficial disciples," responded Zhang Jun. "Coincidentally, I'm currently in need of some manpower, specifically an alchemy apprentice and an herb gatherer. Let these 2 follow me instead." Dr. Mo randomly raised his finger and pointed, just as luck would have it, towards Han Li and Zhang Tai, the 2 unofficial disciples. "This disciple will obey your words." These 2 unofficial disciples actually caught eyes of the esteemed Dr. Mo. Their karma must be exceptional. "The 2 of you, why are you still standing there? Hurry and come to pay your respects to Dr. Mo. If you are able to learn a thing or two about the arts of healing from this esteemed elder, you will be extremely fortunate." The 2 seniors had no traces of hesitation or objection on their face. The senior with the long and thin face, Wu Mingrui, flattered Dr. Mo in order to curry favor with him. Han Li and Zhang Tai, upon seeing the 2 senior disciples, sudden change of heart, had no objections. They could only accept in silence and follow the old man into the forest. Dr. Mo led the 2 of them down a small path that meandered through the forest. The path turned east and west before suddenly stopping in front of an entrance leading to a luscious green valley. On the left side of the valley was a courtyard used for farming medicinal herbs that emitted a fragrant smell into the air. After they entered the courtyard, Han Li spotted many herbs that were unknown to him. On the right side of the valley were lines of houses in various sizes. Looking in all four directions, Han Li saw no exit besides the gateway from which they entered. This valley is called the God Hand Valley. Other disciples will not dare enter this valley unless they are suffering from injuries. The old man stood in the middle of the line of houses and pointed to a smaller house. For now, this will be your home. Rest and replenish your energy. When night falls, look for me in my house so I can inform you about several things. The two of you can call me Old Mo. The old man huffed and considered for a moment before saying, Dr. Mo is also acceptable. After speaking, Dr. Mo ignored the two of them and slowly walked towards an impressive-looking house, coughing with each step. Completely exhausted, Han Li did not bother to check with Zhang Tai before entering the house and selecting a bed to fall asleep on. He was satisfied, because, at this moment, he was halfway to becoming an inner disciple of the Seven Mysteries Sect. Chapter 6, Nameless Oracular Formula. Get up, get up. A barely audible sound came from above Han Li, rousing him from his deep slumber. As soon as he opened his eyes, a huge face appeared in front of him. In shock, Han Li pushed himself backwards. Only then was he able to see that the owner of the face that had frightened him to death was the boy named Zhang Tai. Hurry up and come eat something. After you've finished, we need to see Old Mo. Zhang Tai passed some steaming white buns over to Han Li. Where did you find this food? Han Li stared blankly for a moment before accepting the buns. At a kitchen near the valley, I saw a ton of people eating food, so I also grabbed a portion. After I had finished, I realized that you hadn't eaten yet, so I grabbed 2 buns for you. Zhang Tai smiled sincerely at Han Li. Thank you very much, Brother Zhang. Han Li was somewhat touched. Seeing that Zhang Tai looked quite a bit older than himself, he couldn't help but blurt out the words Brother Zhang. No problem, I'm too used to labor. If I'm idle even for just a moment, I always feel a bit uncomfortable. If you ever need any help in the future, don't hesitate to tell me. I have nothing else but strength. Zhang Tai seemed to be somewhat embarrassed as he began to stammer. Han Li hadn't eaten breakfast or lunch and was somewhat starved. In just a few bites, he devoured 1 bun. With just a bit more effort, both of the large buns completely disappeared into his stomach. It's getting late, we should go see Old Mo. Han Li burped a few times and looked out the window towards the setting sun. After mentally calculating the time, he decided that it was probably about time to go see Dr. Mo. Zhang Tai didn't object, following Han Li to Dr. Mo's house. There were rows of bookshelves along all 4 walls of Dr. Mo's residence. These shelves were densely packed with various books. Old Mo. Old Mo. Dr. Mo's back was tightly pressed against his chair as he was currently engrossed in reading the book in his hands. He didn't seem to have noticed the 2 people's arrival, nor had he heard their greetings. The 2 of them were still children after all, so when they saw Dr. Mo ignore them, they were at a loss on what to do, unsure of what would be the best course of action. Thus, they could only stand to one side and wait. Finally, by the time Han Li's feet had begun to turn numb, Dr. Mo slowly placed his book down onto the table next to him. He coldly looked over at the 2 children and picked up his teacup to drink a few sips before slowly saying, From this day on, you 2 will be accepted as my unofficial disciples. I will teach you some general knowledge on picking medicinal plants and refining medicines. I may also teach you 2 some life-saving healing techniques, but I will absolutely not teach you any martial arts. Dr. Mo expressionlessly put down his teacup. I will teach you 2 a set of body and spiritual cultivation chants. Although it won't allow you to successfully subdue your enemy, it will strengthen your bodies. If you guys really want to learn some martial arts, you can go learn them from some other instructors. If you do so, I won't object, but I'll check your progression on this set of cultivation chants in half a year. If you don't meet the standard, I'll force you out to become an outer disciple. Do you 2 understand? Dr. Mo's tone suddenly became much more serious. It looked like he attached great importance to this set of chants. We understand, Han Li and Zhang Tai replied in unison. You 2 should leave now. Come back tomorrow morning. Dr. Mo waved his hands at the 2 of them, gesturing for them to go out. He then picked up his book and began reading it again. Before Han Li left, he couldn't help but glance back at the book in Dr. Mo's hands. It was a pity that he didn't know how to read. He could only tell that the title was made up of 3 large black characters. Unfortunately, Han Li didn't recognize them. As soon as Han Li walked out of Dr. Mo's residence, Han Li couldn't help but let out the breath he had been holding. He didn't know why, but just now, he hadn't even dared to breathe in Dr. Mo's presence. His mind had also been incredibly tensed. Now that he had left, he immediately loosened up, returning to his normal state. During the following few days, Han Li's excitement never faded. He'd finally become a disciple of the Seven Mysteries Sect. Although he was still just an unofficial disciple, it was still better than the children that had been sent home. Even if he didn't pass the test in half a year, he could still become an outer disciple like Third Uncle. In Han Li's opinion, Third Uncle was a person of great status and position, so he didn't concern himself over the examination in half a year. He even secretly hoped from the bottom of his heart that he wouldn't pass. That way, he could leave the mountain earlier to see his parents and his most beloved younger sister. During the following few days, Dr. Mo would teach them some medicinal knowledge in the mornings. In the afternoons, he would make them study the body's 12 main meridians, energy channels, and acupoint locations. As for the little he taught them of martial arts, he made them maintain the horse stance and hit straw dummies. A month later, the two of them were completely isolated from the other children. They no longer spent time learning anything else besides the chant. Ever since Dr. Mo had begun teaching them, they spent most of their time practicing the nameless chant. Dr. Mo strictly ordered them to not tell the chants to anyone else. If even a small segment was leaked, Dr. Mo would harshly punish them and kick them out of his apprenticeship. During this period of time, Han Li began to have a better understanding of the Seven Mysteries Sect, and Dr. Mo the Seven Mysteries Sect had a disciple named Wang Lu, who possessed the teachings handed down by the Sovereign Seven Supreme. Wang Lu became the sect leader of the Seven Mysteries Sect, and he split the sect with the help of the three other sect leaders. They divided the sect into two segments, the inner and outer branch. The outer branch had a total of 4 divisions, namely the Flying Bird Division, Treasure Gathering Division, Four Seas Division, and External Blade Division. The inner branch also had 4 divisions, namely the 100 Forge Division, 7 Supreme Division, Consecrated Division, and Blood Blade Division. In addition to the inner and outer branch, there was a council of elders that reported to the vice sect leaders and the sect leader. Dr. Mo was originally not a disciple of the Seven Mysteries Sect. A few years ago, sect leader Wang carelessly fell into an enemy's trap while outside of the Celestial Rainbow Mountain and was heavily injured by the multiple attacks from the opposing party. As he wavered on the brink of death, his allies were unable to do anything about it. Just then, they happened to encounter Dr. Mo, whose brilliant healing and effective medicine saved sect leader Wang's life. Sect leader Wang naturally couldn't help but feel extremely grateful for Dr. Mo. He later found out that, in addition to his profound medical expertise, Dr. Mo was a strong martial arts practitioner, which convinced sect leader Wang to invite Dr. Mo to join his sect. The elders carefully picked a small valley in the mountains to erect a residence specifically for Dr. Mo's use in order to make the shift as comfortable as possible. The valley soon became a venerated place within the Seven Mysteries Sect thanks to Dr. Mo. Although none of the disciples had ever witnessed his skills, nor did they know how strong his martial arts was, Dr. Mo had used his brilliant medical expertise to save quite a few disciples' lives. Thus, although he was normally expressionless and was a man of few words, he received a great amount of respect from the inner disciples. Chapter 7. The Difficulties of Cultivating. Han Li slowly transferred energy from his meridians back to his dantian. He had managed to reach the 7th cycle of qi circulation today, and Han Li knew that his body had already reached the limit of what it could handle. If he were to try to do another cycle, all his meridians would completely rupture, inciting a pain worse than death. Even though he was a courageous person, Han Li couldn't help but break out in cold sweat at the thought of this pain. It had already been half a year since Han Li joined the sect, and the official-unofficial disciple exam had ended slightly over 2 months ago. Only a small portion of the unofficial disciples were officially promoted to the inner branch. Most unofficial disciples weren't able to pass this point and had no other choice but to pack their belongings and become a disciple of the outer branch. The children that didn't pass would generally enter the Treasure Gathering Division or the Flying Bird Division. For those that showed outstanding performances, they would receive another step further in their training and would then have the chance to join the more respected External Blade Division. Of course, it was only natural that the Four Seas Division was the most respected of the 4 divisions, but unfortunately, they only accepted those that made names for themselves through their martial arts. If one didn't have a certain level of expertise in martial arts, it was pointless for them to even dream about joining the Four Seas Division. These immature and inexperienced children were even less worthy of any mention. When Han Li recalled the details of the examination from 2 months ago, he couldn't help but feel a bit frightened. A few dozen miles away from the celestial Rainbow Mountains was a neighboring desolate mountain where a group of people were sparring. There were a few senior disciples who excelled in martial arts and were fiercely locked in combat. With each and every test, Han Li couldn't help but feel a little bit of joy at the misery of others. During their entire stay at the Seven Mysteries Sect, Han Li and Zhang Tai had never taken such a terrifying test before. Dr. Mo had said that his examination would only test them on the cultivation chant, but Han Li didn't believe the test would be as easy as it sounded. Looking back, Han Li could clearly remember the intense effort he had to put into his cultivation. According to Dr. Mo, this oracular chant was only a single part of a set. Within half a year, Han Li and Zhang Tai had successfully comprehended the first layer of the cultivation chant, which Dr. Mo would be examining. If the two were able to overcome Dr. Mo's expectations, then they could become Dr. Mo's personal disciples and even share the same benefits as the inner disciples. Not to mention, Han Li had also heard from others that the treatment the inner disciples and outer disciples received was so vastly different that it spoke volumes of how enormous of a difference there was between the two. He then realized how ignorant he had been and cast away any thoughts of becoming an inner disciple. Han Li would be satisfied by just joining the Seven Mysteries Sect and receiving some silver to send back to his family. Everything else had seemed irrelevant because, above all else, he truly desired to help his poverty-stricken family. His only goal was to be able to take money home so he could provide his family with a better life. After learning Dr. Mo's chant, Han Li had not once stopped cultivating. He spent every possible moment of day and night relentlessly practicing the chant. Because Dr. Mo hadn't given them any pointers on how to cultivate, Han Li could only theorize by himself. After discussing with other young cultivators, he discovered they were using the Seven Mysteries Sect's positive yang energy, a self-meditated cultivation method. Relying on both the chant and the positive yang energy, he cultivated assiduously for 3 months, but Han Li was shocked to realize that his progress was extremely slow. He had spent a great deal of effort, and yet he was rewarded with one small thread of cool energy inside of his body. The energy was so infinitesimal that he could barely notice that it was there. If he hadn't checked his body carefully for results, he would not have noticed the strand of energy. Could this be the rumored true qi the instructors had talked about? Han Li suddenly came to this realization. The other disciples cultivating the positive yang energy had told him that there was a distinct flow of warm energy and qi being generated within their bodies. However, the thread of energy in Han Li's body was extremely cold, completely opposite from the energy gained from cultivating positive yang energy. Looking at the results, it was obvious Han Li was very far behind the other disciples. Those who used the true qi from the positive yang energy cultivation were able to punch a fist-sized hole through a small tree trunk and leap 3 meters into the air. Han Li, however, after circulating the strange qi in his body, felt practically no different from his normal state. The only difference he could tell was that his spirit was more vigorous and his appetite was even more ravenous than before he came to the mountain. But what use was that? Seeing that the other children on the mountains were gaining ridiculous power, Han Li couldn't help but feel dejected. After realizing that he had barely made any progress, Han Li had nearly given up on his several months of hard work. He thought that with such a huge gap between himself and the others, he would not have a chance to catch up to the other children in the remaining amount of time before Dr. Mo's test and successfully pass it. It would be better to plan for his trip back home instead. Incidentally, Han Li one day came across the cultivating Zhang Tai and realized something. Ever since Zhang Tai had started his cultivation with this mysterious oracular formula chant, his body showed no changes at all. There was no effect, not even a small amount of true qi could be seen. Knowing that he had at least succeeded in forming one strand of true qi, Han Li regained the confidence he had thrown away earlier. With the remaining amount of time, he furiously tried to cultivate the oracular chant. He worked even harder than before, training like a madman. Han Li began to use every single second to meditate and cultivate. Even when he was sleeping, he kept his body upright in a meditative position in hopes of having even a slight breakthrough. Of course, this intensive training method could not be maintained for longer than a few days. If he strained himself past his limit, his lack of sleep would make him unable to efficiently cultivate. What puzzled Han Li the most was that, after Dr. Mo imparted the oracular chant to the two of them, he stopped interacting with them. Even their questions on cultivation had been ignored by him as if he did not even notice their existence. Every day, Dr. Mo would bring out the book with the 3 black characters written on the back cover and study it, staring intently as if the lines of text outlined the image of a beautiful woman, and the cover was made of pure gold. At the beginning, Han Li and Zhang Tai thought that Dr. Mo no longer wanted to be a medical doctor, but rather was studying bitterly to pass an imperial exam. After the two children learned to read, however, they recognized the three words on the back cover, which read, "Scripture of Longevity." Dr. Mo was reading a book about how to cultivate oneself to the point of extending one's lifespan. In that moment, the two children suddenly realized that Dr. Mo wasn't trying to pass the imperial exam. He was trying to live thousands of years like a river turtle. Turtles were thought to be able to live for thousands of years. Chapter 8. Entering the sect as a disciple. After half a year of relentless cultivation, Han Li was finally going to take Dr. Mo's test. Zhang Tai was fidgeting as he stood close to Han Li. His behavior was nothing strange. Zhang Tai had told Han Li that for the past 6 months, he had made no progress on the oracular chant given to them by Dr. Mo. Han Li knew that Zhang Tai's efforts in cultivating the oracular chant were no less intense than his own. Although Zhang Tai was unlike Han Li, who practiced like a madman, the efforts he expended could still be considered conscientious and diligent. Strangely, the oracular chant seemed to be useless to Zhang Tai. No matter how much effort he put in, he wasn't able to produce even the slightest amount of effects. It seems like Zhang Tai would never successfully cultivate the oracular chant. Han Li's mind was unsettled. He knew that Zhang Tai would probably fail the test. Even though Han Li was slightly successful in learning the oracular chant, he was not stronger than Zhang Tai in any way, so there was a high chance of both of them failing Dr. Mo's test. Fearing the worst, Han Li assiduously cultivated. By the time of the exam, the strange energy flowing in his body had increased by a little. If the energy was as thin as a strand of hair in the past, it was now slightly thicker, resembling a thread of cotton. Even so, this did not reassure Han Li, who feared he might not pass Dr. Mo's test. "Are you guys prepared? Let me take a look at the fruits of your cultivation." Dr. Mo squinted his eyes as he sat and coldly stared at the two of them. "We are ready." Han Li and Zhang Tai could only put forth a bold face and agree. Dr. Mo slowly rose from his chair and stood up. He put the book that always seemed to be nearby down on the table. "Extend your hand. Circulate your chi for me to see." Dr. Mo held Zhang Tai's right wrist with one hand and placed his other hand on top of Zhang Tai's dantian. After the time it took to brew a cup of tea, Dr. Mo retracted his hands and closely evaluated Zhang Tai. Zhang Tai's face was flushed as he nervously put his hands behind his back, lowering his head and not daring to look Dr. Mo in the eye. He knew Dr. Mo had most certainly discovered that he made no progress in the oracular chant and would probably punish him to teach the two of them a lesson. "It's your turn." To their surprise, Dr. Mo didn't even show the slightest indication that he would punish Zhang Tai. Some slight hints of disappointment flashing past Dr. Mo's eyes were the only reactions Dr. Mo had. After examining Zhang Tai, he turned to Han Li and motioned for him to come closer. He then held Han Li's wrist and began the inspection. "His touch feels just like ice. It doesn't feel like the touch of a living human," Han Li mused in his mind. The skin on Dr. Mo's hand was dried and full of calluses. As he held Han Li's hand, Han Li could feel slight waves of sharp pain. Perhaps it was because the external interference agitated the energy within Han Li's body, but the strange flow of energy actually started to circulate by itself. It flowed through his meridians and energy channels, passed all his acupoints from his dantian to his head, and flowed to his 4 limbs. It completed a full cycle before flowing back to his dantian. The moment the strange flow of energy circulated throughout his entire body, Han Li's pain from Dr. Mo's touch immediately dissipated. "AI?" Dr. Mo involuntarily let out a sound of surprise. It appeared that he had discovered the strange flow of energy in Han Li's body. "Quick, circulate your energy according to that chant that I taught you once again." Although Dr. Mo tried his best to suppress his elation, traces of madness and excitement still flashed through his eyes, causing Han Li to be secretly alarmed. Slowly, let me take a good look," Dr. Mo added as his usually cold tone of voice became rushed, placing his other hand on Han Li's dantian. Han Li could feel both of Dr. Mo's hand tremble slightly. As Han Li circulated the strange energy, Dr. Mo became quite agitated. Not bad, this feeling. This is the feeling that I wanted. I'm not wrong, I'm not mistaken, ha ha ha." Dr. Mo, after a thorough examination, could no longer hold back and started laughing maniacally. Both his hands tightly clutched on Han Li's shoulder. Even his normally squinty eyes enlarged as they intensely stared at Han Li. It was as if he had seen a rare and valuable treasure, his eyes flashing with faint traces of madness. Han Li's ears were ringing from Dr. Mo's unceasing laughter, and he felt slight pain on his shoulder. Seeing the madness in Dr. Mo's eyes, Han Li could not help but feel terror in his heart. Good, very good. From the expression on Han Li's face, Dr. Mo could tell that he was terrified. Only then did Dr. Mo realize that he had been overeager. Thus, he controlled himself and regained his composure. In the future, you must work as hard as you're working right now. From this day onwards, you will be promoted to my personal disciple. After saying that, Dr. Mo released his tight grip on Han Li's shoulder and proceeded to pat him in encouragement. Dr. Mo regained his usual calm look, almost as if his loss of control had never happened. But from his occasional glances at Han Li, one could tell that he was still tremendously excited. As for you, Dr. Mo finally shifted his gaze onto Zhang Tai. Zhang Tai was thunderstruck by the events that unfolded earlier. Seeing that Dr. Mo shifted the topic of conversation to him, Zhang Tai awoke from his daze with a start. Just thinking that he failed the assessment and would be asked to leave the mountain caused traces of bitterness to appear on Zhang Tai's face as he looked at Dr. Mo. Your talent is questionable. Despite such a long period of time, you still could not produce even a small trace of energy. Accepting you as my personal disciple would be too much of a stretch. Dr. Mo repeatedly shook his head. Zhang Tai's heart fell down to the bottom of an abyss after seeing Dr. Mo shaking his head. But suddenly, Dr. Mo seemed to have thought of something interesting, as he gazed at Zhang Tai with a bizarre expression in his eyes. Looking at your bone structure, I may have a suitable technique for you. I just wonder if you are willing to learn from me. Dr. Mo's sudden shift in conversation caught everyone by surprise. It was as if Dr. Mo wanted to allow Zhang Tai to pass the test. The moment Zhang Tai heard Dr. Mo, how could he reject the offer? He immediately gave his consent and said that he would be willing to learn from Dr. Mo. Excellent, the two of you can depart first. Tomorrow, I will hand you both new cultivation techniques. It could be seen that Dr. Mo's current spirits were excellent. Han Li and Zhang Tai both looked at each other and felt that today's test had been full of twists and turns. After all, both of them actually passed, leaving them both satisfied and pleased. Chapter 9, Way of the Armored Elephant. Looking back, Han Li couldn't help but give a knowing smile. In the half-year that Han Li spent with Zhang Tai, because their personalities matched well with each other, the two had naturally become very close friends. Han Li slowly stood from his cross-legged position and rubbed his calves. After sitting in the cross-legged position and meditating for a long time, his legs had become numb, and even some of his bloodstreams felt clogged. After kneading them for some time, his legs returned back to their normal state. Standing up, Han Li dusted himself in his usual custom before exiting the stone chamber. Turning his head back to look at the stone chamber used for cultivation, Han Li couldn't help but sneer at himself. This entire chamber was made of solid granite, while the doors were made of a giant piece of crocidolite. If a normal human wanted to break into this room, he or she would need to spend at least 3 hours hacking at the doors with an enormous axe. TL Crocidolite, https://wikipedia.org/wiki/rebukite. In the Seven Mysteries Sect, only the sect leader, elders, and division heads were allowed to use this type of silent cultivation chamber. Not even inner disciples were allowed to use them as they pleased. This cultivation chamber was created for those practicing profound cultivation techniques to guard their practice against any external disruption, and in order to prevent qigong deviation. Han Li didn't know what methods Dr. Mo had used, but the sect somehow granted him the usage of his own personal cultivation stone chamber, built into the side of the cliff of the God Hand Valley. TL, qigong deviation is when cultivation goes awry. After the cultivation chamber was built, Dr. Mo had assigned it for Han Li's sole use. Seeing such a gift, Han Li couldn't help but feel humbled by Dr. Mo's benevolence. Dr. Mo's treatment of Han Li was perhaps too good to be true. Ever since Han Li had become his official apprentice, Dr. Mo had personally dipped into his own supply of herbs for Han Li to consume. Not only that, Dr. Mo also created an unknown medicinal bath for him to soak his body in. Han Li didn't know what types of herbs were being used, but as he watched Dr. carefully refine those herbs, his normally impassive face revealed a hint of reluctance. Even Han Li could figure out that these herbs were extremely valuable. Clearly, these benefits were extremely useful to him, causing Han Li's cultivation speed to increase severalfold. Han Li had recently succeeded in mastering the first layer of the mysterious formula chant imparted to him by Dr. Mo. During his process of breaking through, his meridians had nearly ruptured several times, and he had suffered from some moderate internal injuries. But thanks to Dr. Mo's expertise in the healing arts, the injuries to his meridians were easily repaired, and with the aid of the medicinal herbs, Han Li did not suffer from any serious, permanent damage. Every time Han Li was even slightly injured, Dr. Mo would become even more worried than Han Li himself. This worry manifested itself the entire time he treated Han Li, making Dr. Mo very tense. It was only when Han Li's injuries began recovering that he let out a sigh of relief. Dr. Mo's concern went far beyond that of a normal relationship between master and disciple, and caused Han Li to feel a little uneasy about the situation. If it were not for his third uncle, or the fact that no one ever walked out from these valleys, Han Li would have thought that Dr. Mo was actually his long-lost relative based on the attention that he had been showing to Han Li. TL. The author did not make it clear how Han Li's third uncle prevented him from thinking this. Walking out of the cultivation chamber, Han Li lazily stretched his body and walked away from the cliff. After he had become an official disciple, Han Li and Zhang Tai moved from their original quarters into their own personal house. As he passed by Zhang Tai's room, Han Li shot a glance inside. As it turns out, Zhang Tai wasn't inside. Han Li thought that he was probably by the Crimson Water Peak's waterfall, cultivating his new martial arts technique. After the examination, Dr. Mo instructed Han Li to continue practicing the oracular formula chant and refused to teach him any martial arts. However, in an attempt to pacify Han Li, Dr. Mo personally instructed Han Li in the art of healing without holding anything back. Whenever Han Li had a question about medicine, Dr. Mo would answer right away, even going as far as allowing Han Li to look through the various books in Dr. Mo's library to find an answer to his question. As for Zhang Tai, Dr. Mo fulfilled his previous promise and imparted a set of martial arts to him. The martial arts Zhang Tai practiced was extremely peculiar. According to Dr. Mo, it was an extremely obscure branch of martial arts named the Way of the Armored Elephant. Even the name of this particular martial art was rarely heard of, let alone the existence of practitioners who actually cultivated it. It differed from the martial arts of regular practitioners in Jianghu. Generally, the progression of cultivation for normal martial arts ranged from easy to difficult. As the level increased, so would the difficulty. Thus, the higher the level, the more effort it would take for one to achieve a breakthrough. Zhang Tai's particular martial arts style was divided into 9 layers, with the initial 3 layers being the easiest to cultivate, following the same principle as normal martial arts. However, starting from the 4th layer, the difficulty of breaking through was increased to a monstrous level, in addition to suffering the excruciating backlash caused by practicing the Way of the Armored Elephant. Many cultivators of this set of martial arts could not bear such excruciating pain and would stop their progression at the 4th level. Not to mention the 5th level nor the 6th level, the excruciating pain would only increase with each level. TL. Jianghu equals World of Martial Artists. After breaking through from the 6th layer into the 7th, there would be no further bottlenecks, and cultivation would be much smoother. The only drawback was that the cultivator would need to suffer from monthly bouts of intense pain. This intimidated many people who desired to cultivate the Way of the Armored Elephant. This particular branch of martial arts was slowly dying out. This martial arts style was very peculiar. When it reached a high enough level, its strength would become truly astounding. It was said that those who reached the 9th layer had bodies as tough as gemstones. They were impervious to all weapons, even fire and water. Even palm strike, fist techniques, and legendary swords and sabers wouldn't be able to injure them. But what made people most envious was that, after cultivating this branch of martial art, practitioners would gain the tremendous strength of an elephant. After reaching a high enough level, their strength would be limitless. They were capable of catching live wolves and ripping tigers apart, as well as other unparalleled feats. Those who had heard of this style both feared and adored it. Other than the creator of this martial art, there was no other individual who had managed to cultivate it to the 9th layer. Legend has it that the creator of this martial art was born without the sense of pain. That was the reason why he was able to create such a perverse martial art and execute it to its greatest potential. Although Dr. Mo had explained the benefits and consequences in its entirety to Zhang Tai had no concerns about the harm it could bring to his body. He coveted the strength the Way of the Armored Elephant could bring him, and promised right away to cultivate in this style of martial arts. Without even looking for another style suitable to him, Xianxia had already reached the peak of the first layer in 2 months. In order to break through the first layer of the way of the armored elephant, Dr. Mo had suggested that every afternoon, Xianxia should go to the Crimson Water Peak's waterfall and cultivate under the impact of the surging waters. According to Xianxia, this method really did have a godly effect. The difference between the peak of the first layer to the second layer was only paper thin, and as long as he worked a little harder, he would break through the bottleneck with relative ease. Chapter 10: Mysterious Bottle. Han Li slowly followed the path from the God Hand Valley out of force of habit. His steps automatically carried him towards the Crimson Water Peak. He did not have anything important to do at the moment, and as such, he followed his normal schedule and visited Xianxia, who was training at the Crimson Water Peak. Xianxia grimaced in pain, allowing the impact of the waterfall to temper his body as he cultivated the way of the armored elephant. Not everyone could withstand the torturous pain from cultivating this particular martial arts. Even the first layer already required one to suffer excruciating pain. To reach the 9th layer, wouldn't it require one to cultivate to the point of insanity, losing their skin in the process? I wonder if Xianxia already regrets his previous decision. The excruciating torture one had to endure to practice the way of the armored elephant is impossible to imagine, Han Li thought as he walked, carelessly kicking the fallen leaves and branches that were blocking his way. Maybe after a few more days, the two of us will go and beg Dr. Mo for another martial arts skill for Xianxia so that he won't need to suffer from excruciating pain each time he practices. Having absorbed himself in thought trying to think of methods to allow Xianxia to escape from this torturous path of practice, Han Li slowly roused himself to look at his surroundings. Han Li tilted his head as he gazed at the line of trees by his side. Currently, the year was approaching the late stages of autumn. The trees' branches were all naked and devoid of leaves. Piles of sticks and dead leaves layered the small paths. Walking on them felt like walking on cotton. Han Li found this experience extremely comfortable. In that moment, the sounds of weapons clashing drifted over from a nearby mountain peak, as well as the many loud cheers. After hearing the noises, Han Li glanced in the direction of the mountain peak, annoyed that his good mood had been disturbed. The noise came from disciples of the 100 Forge Division. They were training the disciples selected to join their division in the various arts of weaponry. Every time Han Li saw other sect members gathering and undergoing their training sessions, slight hints of jealousy surfaced in his heart. He wanted to wield a real weapon and demonstrate his skills as well. What a waste! After he officially became a disciple under Dr. Mo, he had been strongly forbidden from practicing such things. Dr. Mo strongly emphasized that Han Li was to devote all of his time to the nameless oracular chant. Therefore, Han Li could only stare with wide and envious eyes. Occasionally, to scratch his itch, he would borrow a few weapons from some of the other sect members he was on good terms with and practice with them. How truly useful was it to cultivate the mysterious chant? Up until now, Han Li had not seen any positive effects of his constant cultivation. Other disciples had already strengthened their body and mastered impressive martial art techniques. If the path of martial arts was compared to a marathon, Han Li was certain that he had remained at the starting point and hadn't advanced in the least. Even Xianxia, who had cultivated for 2 months, had some beneficial changes to show for his efforts. His skin and muscles had become tougher, and his level of strength was also noticeably higher than before. However, if Dr. Mo had not accepted Xianxia as an unofficial disciple, he would not have passed the unofficial disciple test 2 months ago. If he had not passed the test, then staying on the mountain would be impossible, let alone sending money back home. If Xianxia was unable to cultivate another branch of martial arts, his path would be forever sealed. On one hand, Han Li was grumbling about the unfairness of their situation. On the other hand, he was reassuring himself that since he passed Dr. Mo's test, he would not be kicked out of the Seven Mysteries Sect. Han Li retracted his gaze from the other sect members, but he continued to think about Dr. Mo's irritating commands. Distracted and in low spirits, he gazed at the 2 lines of trees alongside the road as pangs of dejection struck him. All of a sudden, Han Li sucked in a mouthful of cool air, his facial expression turning ugly. Out of reflex, he squatted down and used both his hands to tightly clamp on the big toe of his right foot, doubling over in the grass. A sudden, painful flare-up had caught Han Li unaware. His face became a pale white as waves of fiery pain assailed his right foot. Evidently, Han Li had accidentally kicked against an extremely hard object hidden in the piles of leaves. Han Li arched his body and used both of his hands to wrap around his foot. After he lowered his head and removed his shoes, he began to blow heavily on his injured toe. While his brain flooded with pain, he was worried that his swollen toe might have been injured to an extent that would impact his day-to-day activities. After a long moment, Han Li craned his neck and peered downwards to that pile of leaves, trying to find the ungodly, dastardly stone that caused him to be injured. Haphazardly lying about, the fallen leaves were all the same reddish-yellow color. They obscured him from finding the target he sought. Han Li wrinkled his forehead and surveyed the ground before finding a slightly long and thick tree branch. Holding the branch, he stood up carefully. Unwilling to give up, Han Li used the branch in his hands and continued to probe piles of leaves. He spotted an object the size of a fist. Han Li paused momentarily and considered the object in front of him. The culprit, the sinful object that caused injury to his great self, actually had the shape of an elongated bottle. The surface of it was stained with mud, and its original color was impossible to discern. Overall, it looked extremely commonplace. Initially, Han Li thought that this was an ordinary little bottle, but in his hands, the bottle was extraordinarily heavy, its weight vastly different from that of a normal porcelain bottle. Could this bottle be made of gold? No wonder it caused so much pain when he kicked it, but bottles made of gold were rarely seen. Made of gold? Han Li's interest in this bottle peaked as he temporarily forgot about the waves of pain arising from his toe. As Han Li wiped off the excess layer of mud, the original color of the bottle began to unveil itself. The bottle emanated a shiny green glow, and there were intricate black-green leaf patterns engraved on its surface. At the head of the bottle, there was a bottle cap that tightly sealed the mouth of the bottle. Could the interior be hiding something precious? Han Li placed the bottle close to his ear and gently shook the bottle, but he didn't feel any movements from the inside of the bottle. Unwilling to give up, Han Li placed his hands on the cap of the bottle and tried to pry it open. However, no matter how hard he tried, it was to no avail. Curiosity was burning in his heart, and just when he was about to use another method to open it, the pain from his foot suddenly flared up again. Damn, he had forgotten that the toe of his right leg had been injured after coming into contact with the porcelain bottle. Looking at his injury, it seemed he could not visit Zhang Tai today. Han Li decided to return to his residence and apply some medicine on his injured toe before taking his time to figure out the secrets this mysterious bottle was holding. In order to keep the bottle from being spotted by others, Han Li stashed it inside his robes regardless of how dirty the bottle was. Turning back, he limped step by step back to his home. Chapter 11. Difficult to Open Bottle. Han Li didn't meet many people on the way back except for a few senior disciples who were curious at why Han Li was limping his way back. But because he didn't say anything, they didn't pay much attention to him. As he returned back to his room, the pain in his toe got increasingly unbearable. Han Li sat on his bed and took off his shoes to examine his injury. The swelling was incredible. His right toe had an impressive bulge on it, while the cuticle on his toe turned blood red and resembled a big chili. Han Li quickly took out a bottle of herbs from beneath his pillow. Concocted meticulously by Dr. Mo, this medicine sped up blood clotting to an astonishing degree. Dr. Mo didn't easily give away medicine of this caliber. It was originally meant for Zhang Tai, who would inevitably suffer an injury while practicing the way of the armored elephant. Han Li didn't think that he would be the first to use the medicine. Opening the medicinal bottle, a strong herbal fragrance filled the room. He applied a small amount on his injury and immediately felt a relaxing sensation. Just as Dr. Mo had said, it had an immediate effect. Elder Mo's medicine was truly amazing. Han Li took a clean cloth and wrapped up his foot before putting his shoes back on. Excellent, the pain was slowly subsiding. He began to take small steps, as if testing his pain threshold, nodding in satisfaction as he felt that moving was easier than before. Now, it was time to solve the enigma posed by the mysterious bottle that had caused such an injury to him. Han Li took out the bottle from his robes and wiped it clean to restore its natural luster. This bottle wasn't all that big, and a single hand could wrap around the entire length of its neck. It was actually smaller than the bottle that contained Dr. Mo's medicine. The bottle had a shiny green luster and was engraved with a dark green leaf pattern that seemed almost alive. When Han Li felt the contours of the designs on the surface of the bottle, it was almost as if there were actual leaves embedded onto the bottle itself. Weighing the bottle in his hand, Han Li had no idea what type of metal was used to make this bottle, or if it was even porcelain. The bottle didn't have a cold, metallic feeling to it, nor did it have the gloss of porcelain. Han Li had observed the bottle for a good while, and the only thing he could be certain of was that he didn't know what material was used to make it. The shade of green seemed intrinsically part of the material itself, not a color that was added after it was made. Seeing how tightly the bottle was sealed, Han Li naturally became curious. Eyeing the bottle, he strongly desired to see whether or not there was something inside. Once more using his strength, he tried to pry open the cap of the bottle. 1 try, 2 tries, 3 tries. It was as if the cap of the bottle was fused into the neck. It was almost as if it was refusing to move. Han Li was astounded. Back when he first picked up the bottle, due to waves of pain assailing him, he couldn't use his full strength to open it and didn't realize how stubborn the bottle was. But now that Han Li had finished tending to his foot and was using his full strength, he was surprised that he could still not pry open the bottle. Han Li tried to twist the lid once more until his arms began to ache, but there was still no success, so he had no choice but to stop. He stretched and loosened his arms, moving his wrist about. Just now, he had expended a large amount of energy to open the bottle, and his efforts had strained his wrist. Holding the bottle under his eye, he began to inspect it even closer. Unfortunately, there was no secret mechanism under the lid that would allow him to easily open it. This made Han Li frustrated. He wasn't able to open the bottle, so how would he know if there was something inside or not? If it was sealed up this tightly, then there was definitely something precious inside. Han Li held the bottle tightly in his hand, looking at it with a vacant look. In the end, he had decided that he would let Xianxia, who was many times stronger than him, give it a try and see if he could open it. He knew that the current Xianxia could easily lift over 10 buckets of water up and down the mountains as if it was nothing. These days, it was Xianxia who refilled the water in the huge water tank every day. After he decided, Han Li headed towards Xianxia's place, hoping that he would return soon. Waiting for someone was truly unpleasant. Han Li felt that time was passing by extremely slowly. Finally, after waiting for a long time, a creaking sound was heard as Xianxia pushed open the door. Looking up, Han Li saw that Xianxia was wearing only a thin piece of clothing. His entire body was steaming as he perspired freely. Han Li knew that this was the result of his cultivation, so he didn't find it strange. Seeing as Han Li was already in his house waiting for him, Xianxia was stunned. But before Xianxia could say anything, Han Li impatiently thrust the bottle towards him. "Brother Zhang, please lend me your assistance and help me open this bottle." "Where did you find this? It looks rather nice," Xianxia remarked as he took the bottle. "Zai zai zai tl note, sound of twisting bottle. AI, this bottle is so tightly sealed, it's so hard to pry it open. What was used to make this?" Xianxia cut straight to the chase. He wasn't able to open the bottle either. "Gah, I can't do it. This bottle won't open. Why don't you find a senior disciple to help you?" Xianxia shook his head apologetically and handed the bottle back to Han Li along with the suggestion. "Even you can't open this." Han Li was getting more anxious and couldn't help but pace around the room. "AI, what happened to your leg?" Xianxia inquired as he noticed Han Li's foot. "It's nothing. I kicked a rock on the road." Han Li didn't know why, but he didn't want to tell Xianxia about his surprise encounter with the bottle just yet. Right now, he wanted to keep the bottle his own personal secret. Han Li was feeling very disappointed in his heart. He didn't want to sit around and chat with Xianxia at the moment, and after briefly asking about how his cultivation was progressing, Han Li immediately left the room and returned back to his own place to think of a way to resolve his personal problem. Returning back to his room, Han Li put the bottle on the table and stared intensely at it. At the same time, his mind was trying to think of solutions to open the mysterious bottle. Chapter 12. Breaking the Bottle. Peng! Han Li tightly grasped the bottle with his hands, and with anger in his eyes, used his entire strength to smash the bottle against the table. "If I can't use my own body's strength, then I shall use other means to break it open," decided Han Li after thinking of numerous ways to open the vexing bottle. Han Li had long since figured out that using brute strength and violence was not a solution. This type of method, although simplistic and crude, was usually the most effective. But the moment he thought of that beautiful bottle with its mysterious and intricate designs being smashed into smithereens, Han Li could feel a dull ache in his heart pulling him back, causing him to be extremely unwilling to let go of such a beautiful treasure. If there were any other methods to open the mysterious bottle, Han Li would choose those instead of using brute force. If he asked the other senior disciples for help, They might be able to open it, but Han Li had unknowingly started to treat the mysterious bottle as a treasured item and was extremely reluctant to let others know of its existence. The current Han Li was almost driven to insanity by his curiosity regarding the mysterious bottle. Although he knew that it might just be an empty bottle, he was still willing to bet that the bottle was protecting something precious. The more he was unable to open the bottle, the more his curiosity grew. If he couldn't solve the mystery inside the bottle, then he would never be able to sleep well at night. After he decided on his course of action, Han Li stealthily sneaked in a tool shed, selected a small iron hammer from the multitude of tools lying about there, and brought the hammer back to his residence. I know this might be confusing. Wielding a hammer requires body strength, and Han Li previously said he wasn't going to rely on his body's strength. However, wielding a tool is viewed differently from using one's own strength, because it adds a certain mechanical advantage that can accomplish what the body is unable to do. Back in his house, Han Li pried half a brick from a corner in his room and placed the bottle on top of the brick. Han Li raised the hammer with his right hand and swiftly smashed down onto the bottle's body. Peng! Afraid of using too much strength and accidentally smashing whatever was inside, Han Li used only a fraction of his strength in order to test the bottle's hardness. Only after inspecting the bottle and finding that it was undamaged did Han Li relax. He started increasing the amount of strength he used in each strike. Peng 50% strength. Peng 70% strength. Peng 100% strength. Peng 120% strength. Han Li exerted more and more of his strength into each hammer blow. As the motions of his arms got more and more frantic, the speed of the blows grew faster and faster. Even after he had cracked the brick underneath, the bottle laid there innocently without a single scratch on its surface. Han Li was dumbstruck, unable to comprehend the hardness of the bottle. Using his hands to feel its surface, there were no traces of damage. That glossy green surface remained unblemished without any signs of Han Li's furious attempts. This was completely beyond Han Li's expectations. Han Li was absolutely certain now that this bottle was made from an unusual material. There was a 90% possibility that this item was lost by someone of a high status. The owner may have already sent people to comb the mountainside in search for this mysterious object. If Han Li wanted to keep it, he had to be sure to hide it in an extremely secretive location and not let others know of its existence. In his heart, Han Li followed the philosophy of finders, keepers, losers, weepers. As long as one did not obtain the item by stealing or robbing, to Han Li, the item obtained was his by right. If it was some ordinary item, Han Li might have been willing to return it back to the owner, but this mysterious bottle, not a chance. Looking at the bottle, he surmised that this item had most likely been misplaced by either some rich kid from a big family or someone with a high status. Sadly, Han Li did not have any good impression of people from both of these categories. Since childhood, Han Li was from an extremely poor family. Despite working very hard and living like dogs, they were often unable to afford to have a full meal. In the Seven Mysteries Sect, there were two types of people. The first type were those who threw their money about, wasting it on decadent luxury. They treated money as if it were water, spending it freely and without concern. Every time Han Li saw this, an uncomfortable feeling of rage would rise in his heart. The second type of people were those who looked down on the disciples who were born in rural villages. They would often abuse the less fortunate with scathing words and malicious actions. If there so happened to be any conflict between them and the villagers, however small the conflict was, the second type of person would usually form into groups and beat up the poorer kids. Han Li himself had his fair share of abuse. He had been beaten up by the rich kids until his face was swollen and he was unable to get up from bed. Han Li had to rest for a few weeks in order to fully recover. As for those within the sect that possessed both money and status, Han Li also did not have good impressions of them. A good example was Protector Wang. Despite accepting his third uncle's bribes, Protector Wang did nothing to aid Han Li when he was taking the test. Instead, Protector Wang had been biased towards Wu Yan. Despite the fact that Han Li did not have the chance to see many of the grand figures residing in the sect, their image had long been tarnished by the actions of Protector Wang. Whenever these two types of people lost their belongings, Han Li had no intentions of returning the items. He would even prank them by hiding the items in obscure locations. After thinking of this, Han Li decided to remove the pouch which always hung upon his neck. His mother had personally sewn the pouch out of water-resistant leather. Inside the pouch was a good luck charm made from the tooth of a wild boar. His mother hoped this would protect him from danger and illnesses. Han Li opened his pouch and hid the mysterious bottle alongside his good luck charm. He then swiftly sealed the pouch and placed it around his neck. After doing so, he surveyed his surroundings. Luckily, there was no one who had seen him or the mysterious bottle. After taking so many precautions, Han Li felt more secure and threw away all of his concerns that the owner would discover the object and take it from him. Han Li stealthily replaced the hammer in the tool shed and casually walked back to God Hand Valley. As he limped back to his residence, night had fallen. Chapter 13. Strange Phenomena. Because Han Li's leg was injured, Zhang Tai personally delivered the food to Han Li's house and accompanied him for dinner. Looking at the clumsy Zhang Tai in his house, moving the chairs and setting the table, Han Li couldn't help but find it funny. Zhang Tai's care caused traces of warmth to enter his heart. After the table was set, both of them joked around as they ate, pushing food in their mouths while asking about their individual cultivation progress. The moment Han Li brought up the way of the armored elephant, Zhang Tai sighed dejectedly. Currently, Zhang Tai had only managed to cultivate the martial skill to its first layer, but was already half tortured to death by the immense pain. He had to soak himself in foul-smelling herbal baths every night as well as suffer beatings from Dr. Mo designed to toughen his body and strengthen his bones. This method of boorish cultivation had caused Zhang Tai many sleepless nights. Because his entire body was swollen from the beatings, the moment his skin touched his bed, he would grit his teeth in pain. To him, cultivating the way of the armored elephant was nothing but a nightmare. With regards to Han Li's cultivation of the nameless oracular chant, Zhang Tai could not help but feel envy in his heart. He felt that Han Li only needed to spend his time peacefully in meditation like a monk. Hearing Zhang Tai's emotions, Han Li had nothing to say in his defense. He was also aware that his cultivation was much easier when compared to Zhang Tai's arduous labor. Han Li could somewhat understand Zhang Tai's fear towards the way of the armored elephant. As he progressed through the 9 layers of the way of the armored elephant, he would have to bear unimaginable pain. Despite the difficulty, Zhang Tai had persisted, refusing to give up. Han Li could not help but admire and respect Zhang Tai for his unyielding personality. If Han Li were in Zhang Tai's shoes, he would never have chosen to practice such a domineering skill. Even if the skill could turn him into a world-shaking expert overnight, he would still reject it. The two of them had almost finished dinner as they were talking excitedly about martial arts. Once the meal was over, Zhang Tai cleared the bowls and bid his farewell. Before leaving, he still reminded Han Li to take care of his injured foot and to go to sleep early. Standing at the door, Han Li watched as Zhang Tai left and quickly returned back to his house, closing all the windows except for a slight opening in the skylight to allow some air to flow through before taking out the mysterious bottle from his leather pouch. Han Li was only a 10-year-old child with a short attention span. After studying the bottle for a short period of time, he quickly got bored. With his foot injury, Han Li also felt somewhat tired out by today's turn of events. Unknowingly, he fell asleep on his bed with his hand holding onto the bottle. Time passed by. Just when Han Li was sleeping soundly, he suddenly felt an icy cool feeling flowing from his hand. Han Li involuntarily shivered, and he forcefully opened his heavy eyelids, gazing at his hand in a daze. Oh, he immediately sat up with his mouth open from shock, to such an extent that saliva dripped down from his gaping mouth. He no longer felt sleepy. Instead, his attention was fixed on the strange sight in front of him. Rays of white light could be seen beaming through the gap from the skylight. The beams concentrated around the bottle Han Li held in his hand, forming many rice-sized white dots of light on the surface of the bottle. It gave the impression that the bottle was enveloped by the rays of white light. The rays of light looked extremely gentle, not menacing at all, and that icy cool feeling originated precisely from the rays of light. Han Li swallowed a big gulp of saliva and finally turned his eyes away from the bottle. As if it burned his hand, he quickly threw the bottle to one side before scrambling to the other side of the room. After a moment of vigilance, he realized that nothing was wrong and slowly inched towards the mysterious bottle. The mysterious bottle, enveloped by the white light, other than looking beautiful, seemed to possess an aura that was not of this world. Han Li hesitated for a while before using his finger to poke the bottle a few times. Seeing there was no reaction, he cautiously picked up the bottle again. Putting the bottle on the table, he laid on the nearby bed and closely examined this never-before-seen phenomenon. Han Li focused his full attention on the mysterious bottle for about an hour and a half, without even blinking, before he finally realized some of the secrets that the mysterious bottle was hiding. The mysterious bottle was incessantly absorbing the rice-sized beads of white light surrounding it. No, not simply absorbing. It was as if the beads of white light had a will of their own and were fighting with each other in order to be the first to enter the bottle. Hanli viewed this extremely bizarre event and used his fingertip to touch a bead of white light. It felt icy cold. Other than this, there was nothing special about it. Hanli inclined his head and looked upward. The rays of white light were still beaming through the gap in the skylight, as if they had no intention of stopping. Hanli surveyed the interior of his room to make sure the doors and windows were all closed, before inclining his head to look at the skylight once more. Hanli was suddenly hit by a thought. He lightly pushed open the door, popped his head out and peeked at his surroundings. Luckily, it was the middle of the night. Other than insects, there was no one else. Hanli returned back to his room, grabbing the bottle and putting it back inside the pouch before hurrying outside again. He ran towards a remote location before stopping. Surveying all 4 directions and ensuring there was no one nearby, Hanli cautiously removed the bottle from his pouch and placed it gently on the ground. While the mysterious bottle had been sealed in his pouch, the white rays of light had disappeared. However, Hanli was not worried. As he expected, after waiting for a while, rays of white light began congregating around the bottle from all 4 directions. This time round, the rays were much denser than the rays produced in his house. They tightly enveloped the mysterious bottle in a shroud of white light, forming a ball of light the size of a human head. Chapter 14. Mysterious Liquid. Ah, Hanli cried out with excitement and pumped his fist into the air. By doing so, he revealed that he was indeed still a child. His assumption seemed to be correct. When the bottle was in the dark room, the amount of light attracted to it was quite small. But when in a wide and open area, the amount of light attracted to it was far greater in quantity. But what caused the light to gather? What use did it serve? Although he didn't know the answer, Hanli felt he was close to solving the riddle behind the mysterious bottle. Hanli knew that he would soon unravel the secret of the mysterious bottle, which made him tremendously excited. At dawn, the light that had gathered around the bottle slowly faded away. After making sure that there was no one nearby observing his actions, Hanli returned his attention to the bottle's status. Then he bent down to pick the bottle and inspected it. However, there seemed to be no difference since it was still impossible to open. Hanli felt disappointed, but seeing how morning was arriving, he unwillingly put away the bottle and prepared to leave. After all, he still wanted to return to the stone chamber to practice his cultivation. For the next following nights at fixed intervals, the bottle would undergo the same experience. Countless specks of light would fly towards the bottle like moths to a flame. No matter how big or small the specks of light were, they were greedily devoured by the bottle. Initially, Hanli thought that the bottle would continue to undergo the same process for an unknown amount of time. But on the 8th day, something unexpected happened. Hanli went back to the remote place in the mountains and placed the bottle in its regular spot. The absorbance of the specks of light continued for half an hour when all of a sudden, the bottle stopped absorbing. The dark green designs on the bottle began to emit a green radiance as golden words manifested on the surface of the bottle. The strange words on the bottle were imposing and firm, but the written strokes were unusual. The words seemed to belong to an ancient era, the characters flickering incessantly. But this weird occurrence had ended as suddenly as it began. Aside from the golden words that were now imprinted onto the bottle, everything else remained the same. After seeing so many strange things happening with the bottle in the past few days, Hanli was no longer as surprised as he had been in the past. Even the appearance of the golden words did not surprise him very much. Casually grasping the bottle in his hand, he tried to open the bottle on a whim. And much to his extreme surprise, the lid popped off with barely any effort. No way, Hanli stared at the bottle in shock. With next to no effort or thought, Hanli's problem regarding how to open the bottle had been suddenly resolved. How could it be so easy to open? Repeatedly looking down at the bottle to confirm that what he was looking at was not fake, he tried to calm his agitated heart before looking straight into the bottle. Inside the bottle was a jade green drop of liquid no bigger than a soybean. As it flowed around inside the bottle, the entire inside of the bottle reflected a green luster. What was this drop of liquid? Hanli was disappointed. He had put in so much effort only to be rewarded with some seemingly mundane liquid. Disappointed, Han Li put the bottle back into his pouch before turning around and dejectedly returning to his room. His previous excitement had been thrown to the farthest corners of the earth in a sudden roller coaster of emotions. Although he had finally opened the bottle, he was absolutely disappointed with the result. Han Li was prepared to take his time to discover what secrets that drop of jade green liquid held. Perhaps in the future, it would be able to give him an unexpected surprise. Right now, what he wanted to do most was to go back and sleep. For the past few days, he had not been able to sleep properly, which even cut into his daytime cultivation, making his progress so inefficient to the point where even Dr. Mo had inquired him about it. Ever since Han Li had become Dr. Mo's disciple after breaking through the first layer of the chant, he felt that there was no longer a need to practice the chant. Disappointed by the chant's effects on his body, or lack thereof, he was unwilling to continue relying on it to cultivate. For that, Dr. Mo fiercely reprimanded him. As a result, Han Li was unenthusiastic and without spirit every time he cultivated. Seeing this, Dr. Mo became desperate and angry, beginning to doubt his choice in a disciple. Thinking about his situation, Han Li couldn't help but feel wronged. However, he was just not in the mood for cultivation. But what Han Li couldn't imagine was that, after waking up on the second day, he was once again motivated and threw his entire body into cultivating like a madman. The reason for him to cultivate in such a manner was simply because of a simple statement Dr. Mo had made. For every single layer you improve with this chant, I will increase the amount of silver issued to you by another fold. Dr. Mo had seen the thirst Han Li had for money and figured out a way for Han Li to be enticed. This way, Han Li motivated would have enough motivation to cultivate. For the next few days, Han Li dedicated himself to cultivation, hoping to break through to the second layer. Every day from morning to noon and from noon to night, he would enter the stone cultivation chamber and cultivate. Any thoughts about how repetitious, mundane, or boring this lifestyle was immediately got thrown out of Han Li's head. For the sake of Han Li's cultivation, Dr. Mo had even temporarily sealed off the God Hand Valley. Even when he treated patients, he would treat them outside the valley for fear of disrupting Han Li. Han Li was now so focused on breaking through that he even forgot about analyzing the effects of the bottle's jade green liquid. Autumn went by as winter came, then spring rolled in before summer arrived. In a flash, 4 years had gone by. Han Li was now 14 years old. He grew up to be a taciturn, determined and tan-skinned rustic youngster. Based on his external appearance alone, he looked no different than any other common peasant farmer. His looks did not warrant any attention. He was not extraordinarily handsome, and neither did he have a noble's elegance. This was the result of living in the stone cultivation chamber every day. He would travel back and from there to his home. Occasionally, he would go to Dr. Mo's residence to learn about medicine and to read from Dr. Mo's collection of books. The entire valley was his world to live in, and thanks to his hard work, he had finally broken through to the third layer. Chapter 15, 4 years later. Dr. Mo was extremely satisfied with the amount of effort Han Li dedicated to his cultivation. However, he still felt that Han Li's rate of progress at breaking through to the next layer in the oracular chant was too slow. These past few years, the illness Dr. Mo was suffering from had been getting more serious. He would cough countless times a day, with the bouts of coughing getting more and more frequent while lasting longer and longer. As the condition of his body worsened, Dr. Mo started to pay more attention to Han Li's cultivation. From his relentless urging, one could see the anxiety in his heart. For some reason, Dr. Mo attached enormous importance to Han Li. Not only did he increase payment in terms of silver, Dr. Mo's gaze was even filled with the tender emotion, as if he were examining a rare treasure. Despite this, Han Li, who had reached the third layer in the oracular chant, noticed an underlying truth with his extremely acute senses. Han Li inadvertently discovered that behind Dr. Mo's warm and friendly gaze hid a trace of coldness and extreme greed, which made Han Li feel uncomfortable. That gaze that Dr. Mo threw at him actually caused Han Li to be frightened from the tips of his hair all the way to the marrow in his bones. He felt that Dr. Mo saw him more as an object instead of as a living being. This made Han Li felt puzzled. What could he possibly have that Dr. Mo desired? Of course, there was nothing I have that he would be interested in, Han Li assured himself after thinking deeply. There were even times when Han Li thought that he was overly tired from cultivating the nameless chant, but he would shake his head in shame. He could not help but blame himself. After all, berating Dr. Mo behind his back was an ungrateful act. However, he did know the exact reason why. In the deepest recesses of his heart, he still held a feeling of caution whenever he interacted with Dr. Mo as time passed. This feeling of caution got stronger and stronger. Currently, there was a huge problem facing Han Li. He had already reached the bottleneck of the third layer, but Dr. Mo's stock of precious herbs had already run dry. Obviously, Han Li was not a genius by any means. If it was not for the assistance of the medicinal herbs, his cultivation progress would have long stagnated. Every time he met Dr. Mo, Han Li could not help but to feel a sense of shame. Dr. Mo had practically spent all of his fortunes to painstakingly aid Han Li in his cultivation, creating favorable conditions for Han Li, and yet, Han Li was unable to satisfy his request. This made Han Li extremely unwilling to meet Dr. Mo's gaze whenever there was an inquiry by Dr. Mo regarding his state of progress. Strangely enough, for God knows what reason, the highly skilled Dr. Mo was unable to know Han Li's progress without being told by Han Li. Thus, he was kept in the dark regarding the problem of Han Li's bottleneck. However, not long ago, the guilt in Han Li's heart caused him to seek out Dr. Mo and confess about the bottleneck he faced in his cultivation. After Dr. Mo heard that in the past year, there had not been the slightest progress in Han Li's cultivation, his normally expressionless face became extremely unsightly. To Han Li's surprise, Dr. Mo did not rebuke him. Instead, he told Han Li that he would be gone from the valley for a period of time to gather the necessary herbs, and reminded Han Li to continue devoting his efforts into cultivating the oracular chant. 2 days later, Dr. Mo brought along a case filled with tools needed to extract herbs and left the Seven Mysteries Sect. After he left, Han Li was all alone in the God Hand Valley. As for his good friend, Zhang Tai, he had already cultivated to the third layer of the Way of the Armored Elephant 2 years ago and had disappeared without a trace. Zhang Tai only left a letter of farewell, stating that he wanted to explore Jianghu. This incident caused a great disturbance in the sect. After that, there were rumors that Zhang Tai's family was spared from punishment after Dr. Mo pleaded on their behalf. And Li felt that the entire matter was extremely bizarre, and after thinking about it, he was sure that there was more than meets the eye regarding this matter. Regardless, Han Li held no position of importance in the sect, thus his words were ignored, and this matter had long since been swept under the rug. After contemplating, Han Li thought, could it be that Zhang Tai was so afraid of the backlash caused by the fourth layer of his martial skill that he ran away? Putting his thoughts of Zhang Tai aside, Han Li cultivated for a few days inside the valley but was still unable to make the slightest bit of progress. Since he was a hot-blooded male, he decided to explore the celestial Rainbow Mountains instead of staying cooped up in the God Hand Valley. As he walked along the mountain paths, the paths that he knew so well actually held a tinge of unfamiliarity. He could not help but feel slight traces of sadness in his heart. These past few years, because of his cultivation, it was as if Han Li was staying in a prison, unable to take a single step outside the valley. The disciples of the Seven Mysteries Sect should have already long forgotten his existence. On the roads, Han Li met a few disciples that were under patrol duty. From their perspective, this stranger wearing the robes of an inner disciple filled them with suspicion. It was only after much explanation that Han Li managed to convince them that he was indeed a disciple of the Seven Mysteries Sect. To avoid any more situations like that, Han Li decided to traverse along the small trails that were separated from the main road. As he expected, he met no other disciples, and this enabled him to travel faster with no interruptions. Looking at the beautiful scenery and listening to the birds chirping, Han Li felt that, for that moment, it was as if all that was troubling him had melted away. Suddenly, the sound of weapon clashing rang out, as the air erupted with a cacophony of cursing voices, emitted from the ravine of a nearby mountain. What? There are so many people gathered in such a remote location. Great curiosity arose in Han Li's heart, and no longer fearing the questions of other disciples, he followed the noises and came close to the source of the sound. What a big crowd! Han Li stared mutely in shock. The ravine, completely hidden by the forest, was a small area. Despite this, there was a total of 100 people crowding together in the ravine. There were also people standing on the branches of giant trees. Two groups of people were staring at each other, and a thick sense of enmity emanated from both groups. The group of people standing on the left side consisted of a total of 11 or 12 people, while the group on the right side consisted of 6 or 7 people. Han Li discovered that these two groups were of similar age as him. All of them were about 15, 20 years old. A slight smile hung on his lips as he thought, what a coincidence. From this group of people, Han Li could pinpoint a few familiar faces. Fang Yu Bao, Zhang De Lu Ma Yun, Sun Li Song AI. Fatty Wang is even more obese than the last time I saw him. This person is Metalhead Liu, Z. He was actually so tan back then. To think that his skin is so fair and white now, has he become someone that lives on the earnings of a woman so he can sit and be lazy the whole day? Han Li sniggered as he climbed the huge tree as he began to lose himself in his memories. TLZZ, the sound of clicking one's tongue. Chapter 16, Little Abacus. Down below, two bare-handed youths were locked in close quarters combat. One was fat but held a steady composure and possessed Herculean strength. This was Han Li's good friend, Fatty Wang. Fatty Wang's plump body boasted fists of mighty strength and a loud yell to accompany every punch. With each punch, a gust of wind followed. The other fighter was like a rat. He did not bother to block any of the punches thrown at him and instead chose to evade them. It appeared that he wanted to fight a war of attrition, exhausting Fatty Wang before finishing him off. Seeing how his good friend was in the battle, Han Li naturally hoped Fatty Wang would win. After a while, Fatty Wang still showed no signs of slowing down. Although Han Li did not practice martial arts, his intuition told him that Fatty Wang would not lose. He looked around in hopes of finding someone who could explain what was happening here. Han Li saw a person sitting not too far away on a rock. It was a youth constantly gesturing while crying out, "Hit his head, kick his waist, ya. Almost. That's right, kick his butt, use all of your strength." This youth was beaming radiantly as he cheered. It almost felt as if he was standing right next to Fatty Wang, giving words of encouragement as his personal coach. Han Li concluded that this person was pretty interesting, so he slowly climbed down the tree to get to where he was. "Senior, do you know the two who are fighting and why they're fighting?" Han Li asked politely. "What do you mean, do I know? Is there anything that I, Little Abacus, do know? Of course I know everything about the fight. Who are you? How come I've never seen you before? Did you just join the sect? No, that's not right. There's still over half a year until the next disciple examination, so who are you then?" This person was very enthusiastic at first, but when he realized he had never seen Han Li before, his expression became serious and even a little suspicious. "I am Han Li, a friend of Fatty Wang who is fighting there," Han Li replied simply. "Fatty Wang's friend. I know all of his friends and you're not one of them." The person became more and more wary. "Oh, I've been in closed-door training for the past few years. Not knowing who I am is not surprising," Han Li half lied. "Is that right? You too joined the sect as a disciple 4 years ago. To think that would be something that the omniscient me didn't know." He looked at Han Li's clothes, appearing to believe in Han Li's word. The person known as Little Abacus, and Han Li talked about a few unrelated subjects until he finally answered Han Li's question. "Junior disciple, what you don't know is that this is all because of a woman. That is," the self-proclaimed smartapant said as he began to explain in great detail. Indeed, he seemed to know most of the sect matters that were floating around. It seemed that there were two people involved. One was called Wang Yang, who was Fatty Wang's cousin, and the other was Zhang Changui. The two were both disciples of the Seven Mysteries Sect, but one was an outer sect disciple while the other was an inner sect disciple. While these two had grown up in the same town, neither of them had ever spoken with each other. This all happened because of a girl. The girl was betrothed to Wang Yang from an early age, but one day, while traveling back home, the head of the Zhang family had caught a glimpse of her and decided to give her to Zhang Changui. Using his money and influence, he had taken both her and her family, ignoring Wang Yang's engagement. This grievous news had dealt a heavy blow to Wang Yang, as he had long since been infatuated with her. Knowing that there was no way he'd be able to oppose the Zhang family, he jumped to his death in the river. Even though it was a tragedy, his death should have ended the matter. But who could have guessed his close cousin Fatty Wang, after learning what had happened, would refuse to let his cousin go unavenged. After confronting Zhang Changui, the two vowed to duel, agreeing that the loser would be the winner's slave. Zhang Changui may have been arrogant, but he was not stupid. He understood that, in martial arts, he was inferior to Fatty Wang. He requested that he be allowed to bring friends who could help out and join in to fight multiple rounds. Fatty Wang readily agreed. Afterward, Zhang Changui used his money to look for disciples within the outer sect to help him. Although Fatty Wang was poor and had no money, he was a good friend to many disciples within the sect, and many of them had decided to come to his aid. As a result, Many had come to show their support, which led to a great amount of hostility on the verge of exploding. Hearing this, Han Li had realized that this conflict had grown too serious to settle without any bloodshed. Unexpectedly, a small spar had blown up into such an enormous affair. "You are here to help Fatty Wang, right? If they don't abide by the rules, then we will move in and beat them until they wet themselves in fear. Let them know that we peasants are not easy to bully." The youth spoke without stopping for a single breath. Han Li gave a bitter smile as he realized that he should not get involved. After all, picking a side would only serve to make enemies, and because of his few years of cultivation, his impulsiveness had long since been whittled away. Plus, Han Li had never learned any martial arts and wouldn't be able to beat even the weakest disciple. After watching the competition, it would be better for him to return back to the valley. "Good," suddenly the youth cried out loud. Upon hearing the youth, Han Li turned his head back to look at the fight. As it turns out, Fatty Wang's enemy slipped up and was struck in the forehead by a large fist, smacking him to the ground already unconscious. Immediately, a part of the crowd cheered in support, while the others had nasty looks on their faces. Fatty Wang's face had a look of pride on it as he pumped his fist upward. Slapping his butt, he walked swaggeringly back towards his side, smug about his victory. From Zhang Changgui's side came two people who took the fainted disciple away. Then each side produced one individual. One was carrying a saber while the other carried a sword. TL, in this novel, when we mention saber, we mean Dao, the Chinese saber, a thick single-edged sword. When we say sword, we mean Jian, the Chinese sword, thin and double-edged. Each of them had fiery looks on their faces, but neither said a word. Holding their weapons up, they began to clash, the sound of ringing metal filling the air. Chapter 17, Senior Disciple Li 1. Their weapons could only be seen as flashing blurs as the saber, and the sword clashed with no clear victor. Han Li wasn't able to keep up with the fight at all, only understanding that the fight was very intense. The difficulty or effectiveness of their movements and which person had the advantage were far beyond his scope of knowledge. "Junior apprentice Brother Han, I don't know which sect master you've trained under, but I'm sure your martial arts has made massive improvements after training in isolation, right?" Little Abacus curiously asked. Every inner disciple of the Seven Mysteries Sect, after 2 years of practicing their fundamentals in the 100 Disciples Hall, would be separated and be apprenticed to a master to learn more profound martial arts. Only after they finish their apprenticeship would they be able to hold a permanent position within the sect. In the case that a disciple displayed remarkable strength in the disciple examination, they wouldn't even need to practice fundamentals for 2 years. Instead, they would directly enter the 7 Supreme Division, where the sect leader or vice-sect leaders would personally impart some knowledge onto them, giving them a formidable advantage akin to a carp leaping over a dragon gate. TL, https://n, Wikipedia, org/wiki/fish/in/Chinese/mythology. Within those 2 years of practicing one's fundamentals, those with outstanding potential would also be noticed by some elders and accepted as their personal disciple. Backed and taught by such a powerful figure, these disciples' prospects couldn't even be compared to those of other disciples. After hearing that Han Li had only just come out of seclusion, little Abacus was even more sure that he hadn't heard of this person before. He naturally assumed that Han Li was a prestigious inner disciple, so he had been very respectful to him in hopes of gaining favor. "A few years ago, an honored elder took me in as his disciple, but please understand, I cannot disclose just who this elder is." Han Li knew what the other disciple was trying to do, so he had to maintain a matter-of-fact expression while also pretending to carry around an air of arrogance. "Is that right? Senior apprentice Brother Han is quite lucky then. Your position within the inner sect must be high and your potential unlimited. This junior disciple hopes that, in the future, senior disciple will lend a hand towards his juniors." Little Abacus didn't particularly care about why Han Li concealed the name of his master. Whichever honored elder he was surely stronger than his own master, so little Abacus's tone had immediately changed. "Senior disciple Han, just one look at you, and I know that you are definitely not someone ordinary and that you will be successful without any difficulties." He continued to flatter Han Li. "This person's skin is so dark, and his face looks rather stupid as well. How could he be the disciple to an honored elder while I am so clever but haven't been noticed by any elders yet?" Little Abacus secretly muttered to himself while maintaining a respectful expression. Han Li had recognized the change in his speech as well. 1 second he was junior disciple Han, and the next he was senior disciple Han. This was far too funny for Han Li to bear. However, Han Li didn't look down on little Abacus for that. Trying to gain favor with those higher than oneself was one's natural instinct. Someone who wanted a better life first needed to know his or her place. The people who understood this were ones who were successful in life. But what was most disappointing was that the words Han Li had just said were primarily true. Han Li could only be considered nothing more than smuggled goods when compared to those true personal disciples of honored elders. Any other disciple of the Seven Mysteries Sect could easily beat him. If he were to try to flaunt his status and be arrogant, the truth would be quickly revealed. Han Li forced out a smile as he calmly listened to little Abacus's flattery. It was almost as if he were at a dinner party. Senior disciple Han must be strong in martial arts. If he were to enter the ring, he would definitely beat these fighters into sorry states, definitely. Little Abacus continuously flattered Han Li while also watching the match. AI, how strange, such a prestigious disciple should have formidable internal strength, but why does he look utterly unimpressive? He looks scrawny and weak, and his eyes don't have the shine of those who had broken through their acupoints. No matter how closely I look, he is nothing but a normal kid that doesn't know any martial arts. Little Abacus became more and more bewildered. The outcome has been decided. Han Li's light voice had immediately broke little Abacus from his pondering. Surprised, little Abacus swiftly looked back at the ring. As it turns out, the saber wielder had his weapon knocked to the side. One arm was limp, while the other clutched at a wound. His face was ashen, but he did not declare his surrender. This wasn't surprising since the strength between the two disciples wasn't all that much different. If he hadn't slipped up just then, they would have been evenly matched. When little Abacus saw this, there was a look of disappointment on his face, and he said softly, "What a shame." "What's wrong? What do you mean by shame?" Han Li didn't see anything noteworthy, but it seemed that this was not the case for the youth next to him. If Fatty Wang's team had won this fight, then this would have been their third victory, and their best 3 out of 5 contest would have ended. It's a shame that he couldn't end it here. Oh, but that doesn't matter. Right now, the remaining person on Wang Dapping's side is our strongest disciple in martial arts. He uses the lightning-fast saber, which is incomparably fierce and able to smash through metal. Haha, to be able to witness senior disciple Li's strength firsthand, I didn't come here for nothing. No matter who appears on Zhang Changgui's side, our victory is assured. Little Abacus, who was just depressed about their loss, quickly became excited once more as he began to talk about this senior disciple Li. "So this will be the final match?" Han Li asked. He wondered who this senior disciple Li was. It seemed he really knew nothing about the major figures in the sect. At this moment, a grim figure came up to Fatty Wang's side. The youth was holding a long saber as he walked up to the middle of the ring. Without saying a single word, he closed his eyes. "Senior disciple Li, senior disciple Li, senior disciple Li." Seeing this youth come up to the ring, everyone grew excited as they all began to call out his name. With each shout, they grew louder until they eventually began to shake the entire ring with the magnitude of their voices. At this moment, there wasn't one single person that was cheering for a specific side. There was only one unanimous cry for this youth. Chapter 18, Senior Disciple Li 2. Was this senior disciple Li very famous? What is his background? Han Li was extremely surprised by this senior disciple Li's popularity. "You don't even know who is senior disciple Li?" "Well, I was in seclusion for a few years." "Oh yes, I had actually forgotten. My memory is really bad. How could there be any disciple in the Seven Mysteries Sect who don't know about senior disciple Li? It was this preconception that caused me to accidentally forgot about your seclusion." Little Abacus suddenly realized as he hurriedly apologized. "Could you tell me more about this senior disciple Li?" "Senior disciple Han, of course I can. Well, every junior disciple within the sect knows the story of senior disciple Li." Little Abacus, seeing senior disciple Li's opponent hesitating, took this opportunity to explain the legend of senior disciple Li to Han Li. "Senior disciple Han, I don't like to boast, but the story of senior disciple Li is known to both the junior and senior disciples of the Seven Mysteries Sect." After a short introduction, little Abacus began to reveal the story of senior disciple Li, and the story was legendary indeed. This senior disciple, Li, entered the sect about 4 years ago, but was from a different batch than Han Li. He too failed the preliminary test and entered the sect as an unofficial disciple. But after half a year, not only did he achieve the best results out of all the unofficial disciples in his group, he also sparred with the other senior disciples. Defeating over 30 senior disciples single-handedly and breaking many records, senior disciple Li had gained a lot of attention from the higher-ups in the sect. After an intense inspection, everyone was shocked that the bones of senior disciple Li were extremely ordinary, and even his potential was determined to be limited. This made all the higher-ups disappointed, so none of the higher-ups accepted him as their personal disciple. After the 2 years of basic training, he was delegated as a disciple of a protector, and only after managing to learn the most basic of martial skills in the Seven Mysteries Sect. The windstorm saber technique that he was proficient in was one of the most commonly taught martial skills in the Seven Mysteries Sect. If that were the end of his story, senior disciple Li could not be considered legendary, but rather someone with a good beginning and a weak ending. But after a short while, relying solely on this seemingly common martial skill, the windstorm saber technique, he swept across all of the disciples in that year's annual competition. Using just a single technique and ranked 16th, he became the cream of the crop within his generation, which garnered the attention of the higher-ups once again. In the subsequent yearly competitions, senior disciple Li was incomparably bold and powerful, sweeping across all of the competitors like a sharp sword. He obtained an astonishingly high rank, gaining pride and face for all the new disciples. In last year's annual competition, he actually was ranked 3rd. One must know that the disciples in the first 2 ranks had already been in the sect for over 10 years. These 2 disciples were members of an older generation, their age roughly 27 or 28, and they had a much greater internal strength compared to senior disciple Li. There were also many who believed that if senior disciple Li had the same level of internal strength as the 2 top-ranked disciples, senior disciple Li would undoubtedly be ranked the first. Precisely because of this, senior disciple Li captured the attention of the higher-ups once again, and was specially nominated to be sent outside of the sect to undergo training and help out with the Seven Mysteries Sect's various external affairs. While disciples of the same generation were still undergoing training, senior disciple Li had long rendered meritorious service for the sake of the Seven Mysteries Sect, and had even been nicknamed Tiger Li in Jianghu. After which, he was allowed to enter the 7 Supreme Division and obtain the chance to practice higher-grade martial arts. And Li could not help being moved. After he heard the story, if everything he heard was real, senior disciple Li was indeed extraordinary. Senior disciple Li started as an unofficial disciple, and yet he could achieve the results he had today. How admirable indeed. On the side of Zhang Chengui, they reluctantly sent someone out after a long period of discussion. The disciple they sent out looked to be relatively strong, unsheathing a gleaming sword with the thickness of a finger from the scabbard that hung around his waist. The disciple holding the sword was certainly not a person with an ordinary background. After senior disciple Li sensed that someone entered the ring, he slowly opened his eyes, which seemed to be filled with radiance. Senior disciple Li shouted out loud. His sudden shout, akin to a thunderclap, reverberated through the entire region, causing buzzing sounds in everyone's ears. His opponent was likewise affected by the shout, and an expression of fear began to surface on his face. As he shouted, senior disciple Li had already drawn his saber. With a flash of movement, one deceptive action released over tens of blade shadows, trapping his opponent in an encirclement of numerous blades. However, senior disciple Li's opponent was quick-witted and vigilant. Although he had panicked slightly, the movement of his sword was insidious and crafty, and he managed to parry all of the blade strikes with an impenetrable defense. Who is this person? Han Li could not help but ask. He is the son of the 5th elder, Zhao Ziling. The skill he executed, willow swordplay, is extremely tough to fight against. How good is he compared to senior disciple Li? Naturally, senior disciple Li is still stronger, little Abacus said with pride glowing on his face. Why didn't Zhang Chengui send out a stronger expert instead? Zhao Ziling was already the strongest among them. Among us, the junior disciples, who would be able to defeat senior disciple Li, no matter who they send, it is useless. Little Abacus gloated with a hint of taking pleasure in their opponent's misfortune. Indeed, although Zhao Ziling's swordplay was not chaotic, he had lacked any killing intent. He was pressured almost to the point of defeat by senior disciple Li. Also, those with more experience could tell with a single glance that Zhao's defeat was only a matter of time. And Li watched for a moment before another suspicion rose in his heart. There is one thing I still find strange. Why are all the disciples here of the younger generation? What about all our seniors? Even if the rules prohibit them from entering the fight, for the sake of excitement, there should still be 1 or 2 coming to spectate. However, there isn't even a single senior disciple. Why is that so? Han Li candidly voiced out the suspicion in his heart. Little Abacus, after hearing Han Li's question, had a total change in his expression and had a bizarre look on his face as he gazed at Han Li. This made Han Li feel extremely puzzled. Could it be that he had asked a question that was considered taboo in the sect? Chapter 19. Battle in Jianghu. Senior Disciple Han, you are really deaf to the outside world. This was such a massive event in the sect, and yet you didn't know about this. Even though you were in seclusion, your master should have spoken of it to you. Little Abacus's tone seemed to get more and more suspicious. After hearing the question, Han Li did not even bother to speak. Instead, he took out a medallion and passed it over for little Abacus to inspect. Senior Disciple Han, what are you doing? When have I ever doubted you? How could I not believe you? The moment I saw you, I realized that you looked familiar. I must have met you a long time ago, hee. Little Abacus quickly scanned the medallion, and upon finding out that Han Li was indeed the disciple of some elder, he frantically laughed to diffuse the tension. Now, can you tell me? Han Li was still concerned about the question he asked earlier. Of course, there's no problem. Damn, this is terrible. I hope I didn't offend this guy. Little Abacus mumbled as his heart shuddered, then he told the whole truth of the matter to Han Li. For the past few years, the Seven Mysteries Sect and the Feral Wolf Gang had more and more clashes for the sake of the control of the nearby wealthy towns. In total, the two major powers had over 10 clashes, and they both suffered plenty of casualties. Trained as mounted bandits, the members of the Feral Wolf Gang were extremely ferocious, as if they were unafraid of death, and they would go berserk at the sight of blood. The disciples of the Seven Mysteries Sect, despite having superior martial arts, did not possess the right kind of killing intent that was necessary, and when fighting the Feral Wolf Gang, they would always avoid causing too much damage. Thus, in the end, the Seven Mysteries Sect would suffer more casualties. After a few rounds of battle, the higher-ups of Seven Mysteries Sect could not take this lying down, and thus, they had mobilized the majority of disciples within their sect to smash the Feral Wolf Gang's members into smithereens. There were two reasons why the Seven Mysteries Sect did so. First, the control of the towns within its territory was too valuable to be lost, and secondly, to have the disciples become used to bloodshed, allowing them to gain practical battle experience in Jianghu. Even so, despite the inner disciples of the Seven Mysteries Sect holding the advantage during the last few battles, there had been too many casualties. Even some of the older seniors had failed to return to the sect alive. After little Abacus said this, he could not help but sigh. After that, the sect leaders changed the strategy by letting the inner disciples take care of some minor missions and gain experience elsewhere in Jianghu. After they were used to combat, they would come back and join the clash against the Feral Wolf Gang. By doing so, it effectively minimized the number of casualties. Now, after each inner disciple had 2 years of training in the sect, they would be sent down the mountain to take charge of some minor missions to gain experiences before they were tasked to fight against the Feral Wolf Gang. Repetitive, I know. And so, the older senior disciples had already been sent out of the mountain, leaving only a few defenders and the junior disciples who had not yet completed their training. After listening, Han Li suddenly understood why there were differences on the mountain now compared to 4 years ago. Dang, a sound rang out as a sword flew into the sky. Zhao Zai Ling's left hand was pressing on a wound on his right hand, and as he retreated a few steps, his face turned pale while he breathed heavily. Under senior disciple Li's ferocious saber techniques, Zhao Zai Ling had no time to retreat, and thus, he had no choice but to use the sword in his hand to block the attack. Because his internal strength was insufficient, the weapon he held had been flung into the air because of the clash. Senior disciple Li, you are formidable indeed. This junior brother admits his defeat. Zhao Zai Ling forcefully smiled as he bowed slightly. Loud exclamations rang out among the spectators. Senior Disciple Li, what a graceful martial skill. Senior Disciple Li, excellent saber techniques. Senior Disciple Li, please give me some guidance. Cries of admiration rang out for their idol, the sound reverberating through the entire region. Senior Disciple Li kept the huge saber lifted in the air while his cheeks turned red. Initially, it seemed that he wanted to say something, but his expression suddenly changed as he furrowed his brows as if thinking of something. Senior Disciple Li said coolly, I still have urgent things to do, goodbye. Turning around, Senior Disciple Li relied on a movement technique to swiftly leave the area. ZZ, not only is Senior Disciple Li proficient in the saber arts, his movement technique is superior as well. Yup. Words of praise began to ring out. Han Li furrowed his brows. This senior disciple Li's martial arts were indeed not bad, but it seems that he liked to be in the limelight, just like a teenager. After he reflected, Han Li could not help but smile bitterly. He himself was not any older than senior disciple Li, and yet his thinking was so overly matured, just like an old man's. It seems that after practicing the oracular chant, his mental state had matured at a faster rate when compared to his peers. Junior brother, up to now, I still haven't learned your true name. Han Li eyed little Abacus nearby as he suddenly thought of the question. My name is Jin Dongbao. However, senior disciple Han can just refer to me as Little Abacus. Little Abacus was excited after Han Li asked for his name. He figured that he had gained the favor of Han Li and would be able to use him to back him in the future. Next time you are sick or injured, come look for me. I will treat you for free. Han Li patted his shoulders, turned his body and walked back into the forest region. He left behind a dumbstruck Jin Dongbao, who was still pondering over what Han Li's words meant. Chapter 20, Essence Extraction Pill. After leaving the mountain region, Han Li could still hear the voices discussing how to settle Fatty Wang and Zhang Changgui's dispute. Han Li decided not to concern himself about the matter. Whenever he thought little Abacus's dumbstruck expression, he could not help but laugh out loud. His small excursion outside the valley had indeed lifted his spirits, and he was no longer as depressed as before. He ventured out of the forest and walked straight ahead. A small creek appeared at the end of the path. Han Li inclined his head upwards and looked at the fiery hot sun before lowering his head to avoid the glare and to drink some water from the creek. He felt that taking a bath right now would not be a bad idea. As he bent downwards, with both of his hands entering the cool creek water, a voice filled with pain sounded out and reached his ears. Han Li was surprised to think that there would be people in such a remote region. Following the sound of the voice, Han Li wandered upstream and found a person wearing a disciple's robe lying on the ground, his body convulsing while his limbs flailed about. The moment Han Li saw the person, he knew that the disciple was suffering from an acute illness, and if he didn't help now, there might be a danger of death. Han Li rushed over and took out a wooden box from his robes. From the wooden box, he drew out silver needles that seemed to reflect the light as he pierced them into the acupoints on the disciple's back. After he was done with the acupoints on the disciple's back, he turned the body of the disciple around and began to work with the acupoints located on his chest. When the disciple's body was turned, Han Li sucked in a breath. He was shocked beyond measure. This person, who was flailing about earlier, was none other than the senior disciple Li that participated in the battle earlier. Stunned, Han Li could only gaze at the facial features of senior disciple Li. The current senior disciple Li did not have the air of a peerless expert at all. There was no heroic demeanor to be seen anywhere, only a cold face full of pain and suffering as his features contorted together and white foam leaked from his mouth. It was obvious that senior disciple Li from suffering from too much pain to bear, and he was almost to the point of being unconscious. Han Li regained his calm as he muttered to himself. Akin to flowing water, the silver needle in Han Li's hand began to prick the acupoints on senior disciple Li's body continuously over 10 times. At the final prick, Han Li wiped the sweat that had formed on his forehead and released a breath. The usage of the silver needle and strength needed to pierce each acupoint exhausted a huge amount of energy from him. After senior disciple Li's body was riddled with silver needles, he finally woke up and regained consciousness. You are? Senior disciple Li tried to say something, but he didn't have enough strength, so he could not say more than a few words. I'm from the God Hand Valley. Save your breath and slowly recover your strength. I can only remind you that your illness is very strange. In my estimation, only my teacher Dr. Mo would be able to save you, but sadly, he is currently away from the mountain. Han Li took the pulse of senior disciple Li as he furrowed his brows in thought. The medsa ni is at. Senior disciple Li's face paled as his lips shivered, lifting his arms to gesture at something, but he was unsuccessful. You have medicine to cure the illness on your body. Han Li roughly understood his meaning, and he questioned senior disciple Li. Why yes? Senior disciple Li saw that Han Li understood his meaning, relaxed his features and nodded his head. Han Li was no longer polite as he searched senior disciple Li's body for the antidote. He found many useless items, and amongst them, there was a small white jade bottle which he took out. This bottle was made of expensive material and was also tightly sealed. He guessed this was what senior disciple Li was looking for. As he took the bottle and glanced at Senior Disciple Li, his guess turned out correct. Senior Disciple Li's expression was full of joy as he frantically blinked his eyes. Han Li unsealed the bottle, and contrary to his expectations, there was no fragrance of herbal components drifting out, but rather extremely pungent smell. The moment Han Li smelled the pungent smell, his expression turned nasty as he cautiously took out a pink-color pill out from the bottle. This pill was extremely beautiful to behold, yet the pungent smell that was emitted from the pill caused people to have difficulty breathing. "Is this a medicinal pill?" Han Li regained his calm face. Senior Disciple Li was still unable to speak, but he blinked his eyes to convey to Han Li that this was the right pill. This essence extraction pill was created from orchids, crab-tailed flower, 100-year-old egg of blue ant, as well as 23 other rarely seen ingredients. After the pill is concocted, it takes on a pinkish hue and emits a pungent smell. Ingesting it could unlock all of the potential of the human body, consuming the life force in exchange. Am I right? Han Li coldly glanced at Senior Disciple Li, as he listed the pill's descriptions word by word with an unmistakable tone in his voice. The moment Senior Disciple Li heard Han Li's words, his face paled as if devoid of blood, and a frantic expression appeared on his face. "If you ingest this medicine, you would need to repeatedly ingest it after a certain period of time in addition to suffering the excruciating pain. If you refuse to ingest the second pill after eating the first, in the best scenario, you would be paralyzed, and in the worst scenario, you could even die. From the first time you ingested this pill, fate has already decreed that you would be dead in less than 10 years as the pill forcefully unleashes your potential at the expense of burning your life force," Han Li said without stopping. "Don't you try to lie to me that this is not the essence extraction pill," Han Li said. After hearing what Han Li had said, an expression of hopelessness appeared on Senior Disciple Li's face, while an indescribable shock appeared in his eyes. "Are you shocked because this particular medicine is very rare, and yet I know what it is?" Han Li could tell what Senior Disciple Li was thinking. "The answer is simple. I too have eaten a pill like this." Han Li's words broke the tension as he continued to shock Senior Disciple Li. After a while, Senior Disciple Li had an expression of disbelief. "The way I ate the pill was different from how you ate it. I only ate a total of 1 pill, but I separated the pill into 10 portions, which I slowly ingesting over a long period of time. The small amount of drug I consumed was not able to do any harm to my body. Because this particular pill and the smell it emitted was too obvious, I had a very strong impression of this pill, so I easily recognized yours. I had always thought that other than me, there would not be a second person to ingest this type of pill, but who would have thought my fellow disciple had consumed the pill as well?" After saying this, Han Li's gaze contained a hint of admiration as well as pity for Senior Disciple Li. Unwilling to see the pitiful gaze fixed on him, Senior Disciple Li closed his eyes. However, his heartbeat was erratic and his mind was in chaos. "You should have consumed these pills for a few years already. If you refrain from consuming it now, I could beseech Dr. Mo to concoct an antidote for you. Although the medicine cannot recover the life force you lost, it should still be able to grant you 20-30 years worth of life. But sadly, your martial skills would be lost forever. If you continue ingesting this pill, I can deduce from the backlash that happened earlier that you would have at most 5-6 years worth of life left. But obviously, your martial arts would only get better and better, even stronger than the might you displayed today. Since you dared to eat such a pill, this tells me that you are a person with an iron will. Since only you can decide your own fate, do you want to throw away this medicine or keep relying on it?" Chapter 21, Painkilling Medicine. Senior Disciple Li's eyelids lightly shuddered as he pondered intensely, trying to decide which was the better path for him. After a short moment, his tightly closed eyes snapped open as he stared intently at the pill in Han Li's hand with a feverish gaze. Han Li did not say anything more and inserted the pill into Senior Disciple Li's mouth. The white foam around his mouth did nothing to stop him from swallowing the pill, and after it was fully ingested, Han Li slowly retracted all of the silver needles from Senior Disciple Li's body. After the retrieval of all the silver needles, the essence extraction pill began to take effect. Senior Disciple Li's pale face started to take on a reddish hue. At this moment, his body started to convulse again, and his limbs started to shiver as a low drone issued from his throat. Senior Disciple Li did not want to be a laughing stock in front of Han Li, so he tried unsuccessfully to suppress his pain-filled voice. The low drone involuntarily got louder and louder as the shivers got more intense. It was only after a long period of time that the droning began to slowly subside. Finally, Senior Disciple Li recovered as his face returned to its normal, pale color, and his body stopped convulsing. This signaled that he successfully endured the last of the backlashes from consuming the essence extraction pill. Senior Disciple Li straightened his body, crossed his legs, and closed his eyes in order to enter meditation, attempting to circulate his qi to heal his injuries. Han Li found a clean, large rock nearby and sat down on it, watching Senior Disciple Li. After the time it took to eat a meal, the Senior Disciple Li, who was in a state of meditation, abruptly wrenched open his eyes and drew his saber in a flash, placing the shining blade on Han Li's neck. "Give me a reason not to kill you." Senior Disciple Li's eyes were full of coldness and filled with killing intent. "I just saved your life. Is that not a good enough reason?" Han Li stated calmly with no change to his expression except for the twitching of his brows. If one did not study Han Li's face intently, they would not have seen it. Senior Disciple Li's face slightly softened, but his eyes were still filled with killing intent as he stared at Han Li. "Before I made the decision to save you, I already guessed that you might kill me to protect your secret, but I didn't think that your action would be so fast." Han Li bitterly laughed as his face was filled with self-mockery. Despite knowing that saving you would bring calamity upon myself, I, a student of medical arts, couldn't simply sit by and watch you die." Han Li sighed. As Senior Disciple Li heard his words, his face took on a somewhat embarrassed expression, and he shifted the saber from Han Li's neck a little, but did not fully remove the blade. Han Li secretly let out a breath of relief, and he continued his speech more determinedly. "You have no need to worry that I would divulge your secret. One look at my face and you would know that I'm not one to gossip. If you are still worried, I could swear a binding oath. You should be able to tell that I'm not skilled in martial arts, so if you discovered that I broke my vow, you could easily kill me," Han Li calmly suggested. "Okay, swear a binding oath then," Senior Disciple Li said straightforwardly. It was only now that Han Li relaxed. Before he saved Senior Disciple Li, he could infer that Senior Disciple Li was not one to forget a kindness, but he was not completely sure of his assessment. If he was wrong and Senior Disciple Li was a person that returned kindness with viciousness, he would only be able to defend himself with his secret life-saving method. Knowing that he would not have to use it, Han Li stealthily retracted his hand from within his robes. After Han Li swore a binding oath, Senior Disciple Li finally retracted the saber and returned it to its sheath. Han Li slightly felt a slight trace of blood on his throat, caused by the keen edge of the saber. It was sticky to the touch, and as Han Li's heartbeat returned to normal, he could feel cold sweat trickling down his back. What a close call. My evaluation prior to saving Senior Disciple Li was not comprehensive enough. I'm determined to learn from this mistake and to prevent my life from being in the control of someone else's hands ever again. He still had some fear lingering from this event. If there's no guarantee of my safety, I will definitely not save others in the future. Han Li decided immediately. This was the first time Han Li had saved someone, but the experience left him with a bad taste in his mouth. This event only helped to reinforce that the world was full of unexpected turnouts, and the last vestige of kindness in him was slowly being discarded away. Even though he had not turned evil, he was far from being a saint. "You have saved my life and agreed to keep the matter a secret. I, Li Feiyu, owe you a big favor henceforth. As long as I'm still alive, no matter what you need help with, you can look for me. As long as I'm able to accomplish the task, I will definitely help you." As he reclaimed the items that Han Li ransacked through, Senior Disciple Li stated his vow straightforwardly, using his own name as a guarantee after he fully recovered from the pill's backlash. "I fear that I currently have nothing to trouble you with, but you should already have plenty of troubles, no?" Han Li had a slight smile on his face as he faced Senior Disciple Li with another question. "How did you know?" Li Feiyu was startled and slightly lost his composure. "Anyone would have easily guessed. You are just a normal disciple under a protector, yet with your skills, you have surpassed disciples of the vice sect leaders, division heads, and elders. How could they possibly let you live peacefully?" Han Li's response was like a needle drawing blood. With a single prick, he went straight to the heart of the matter. Senior Disciple Li's expression was gloomy and overcast as he agreed in silence. "Your troubles are your own. I have no wish to interfere and cannot interfere even if I wanted to. But for the excruciating backlash from consuming the essence extraction pill, I could help you lessen the pain." "Is this true?" Li Feiyu suddenly snapped to attention as his previous gloomy expression was replaced with anticipation and excitement. He was giddy since the backlash of the essence extraction pill was extremely torturous. Why would I lie to you when there is nothing beneficial for me to gain by doing so? Han Li glanced at senior disciple Li. He had already concocted a remedy that would greatly lessen the pain felt by others, a medicine that he researched in his spare time for Zhang Tai. It was extremely effective, greatly cutting off the nerve's ability to feel pain. This is truly excellent, excellent. Li Feiyu clasped his hands as he looked at Han Li with wonder and excitement. Why are you looking at me with such an expression? I do not have the medicine on me right now. I need to return to God Hand Valley before I can concoct it for you. After Li Feiyu heard what Han Li said, he had a slightly embarrassed look on his face. He had just threatened to kill Han Li and now he was requesting his help. Tomorrow at noon, wait for me at the entrance of the God Hand Valley. I will hand you the remedy in that location, but since Dr. Mo is currently away, I can't allow anyone to simply enter the God Hand Valley, Han Li explained. Very well, I shall be there on time. Thank you, my dear brother. Scared that Han Li would change his mind, Li Feiyu quickly responded with his confirmation. My name is Han Li, the personal disciple of Dr. Mo. Your cultivation in martial arts is so high, you can just directly call me junior brother Han in the future. After Han Li heard the words, my dear brother, he couldn't help but shiver and thus quickly told senior disciple Li his name to prevent him from calling Han Li any more embarrassing titles. Chapter 22, Qigong Deviation. Looking at Li Feiyu's back as it gradually disappeared as he walked away, Han Li quietly stood where he was, lost in contemplation. After they had agreed to meet at noon the next day, senior disciple Li took the initiative to bid Han Li goodbye, saying that he had to meditate to fully heal his injuries. After they had spoken for a long time, Han Li did not ask Li Feiyu why he had consumed the pill. Han Li knew that even if he had asked, it would be useless because things that already happened could not be changed. From his observations, Li Feiyu was willing to forsake his future, just for a short 10 years of fame and glory. This probably meant that he had some underlying reason, which left him with no choice but to do so. No one would willingly commit suicide, so if Han Li really did question Li Feiyu, it would be like rubbing salt on his wounds. Obviously, what Han Li did was correct. Before Li Feiyu left, when he saw that Han Li did not question him about the reason why he was taking the essence extraction pill, he was grateful for Han Li being considerate. Han Li knew that, although Li Feiyu did not mention anything, he assumed that he owed Han Li a favor. Han Li was prepared to fulfill his promise to senior disciple Li, so not only would he not spread the secret, he would also concoct the pain-relieving medicine for senior disciple Li. The reason for him doing so was simple. Since senior disciple Li was not a vile person, nor did he really want to kill Han Li thought that he might as well use this opportunity to increase the amount of favors that senior disciple Li owed him. So, in the future, senior disciple Li would find it hard to turn down his requests. In the next few years, Li Feiyu's martial skills would only exponentially increase as the essence extraction pill burnt his life force, so he would be of immeasurable help to Han Li in the future. Even if Han Li did not need this favor, it did not matter much. Being able to help a character like senior disciple Li also caused Han Li to feel happy in his heart. Although senior disciple Li may not be a good person, Han Li knew that after the events that transpired today, Li Feiyu wouldn't jeopardize him. Han Li ran the whole sequence of events that happened today through his mind again. It was only when he was certain that everything had been accounted for that he returned to God Hand Valley. After he strolled back to the God Hand Valley in a relaxed manner, Han Li began preparations to concoct the pain-relieving medicine for senior disciple Li. It was relatively simple for Han Li to concoct this medicine, as he could find all the ingredients he needed in the nearby medicinal herb garden. The only thing that was slightly complex was the concocting process. One must give it their full attention. If not, the chance of failure would be high. After a busy afternoon, Han Li concocted a year's supply of the pain-relieving medicine senior disciple Li needed. He did not produce more intentionally, as he wanted senior disciple Li to seek him out after all of the medicine was consumed, so that he could increase his importance in senior disciple Li's eyes. This way, senior disciple Li would not be able to easily forget his favor. In the middle of the night, Han Li was suddenly struck by a sense of loneliness as he raised his head to gaze at the stars in the pitch-black sky and begin reminiscing. He was thinking of his family back in his village. He had left the village 4 years ago, and ever since he arrived at the mountain, He had been assiduously cultivating the nameless oracular formula every day and had no time to visit his family. The only thing he did to lessen his heartache was to send tales of silver back every month, hoping that his family was living a better life. He deeply treasured the letters that his parents wrote, even though there wasn't much written in the letters other than telling him that everything was good in his family. His second brother had married, and things were getting better because of the silver he sent back. Reading these letters made Hanli feel much better. However, over the years, Hanli felt that the tone of the letters was gradually becoming more and more polite, as if they were writing to a stranger. Initially, this caused fear to blossom in his heart, as he did not know what to do in this situation. However, as time passed, this feeling of fear gradually numbed as the image of his family in his mind gradually became blurred. He reminisced about matters of the past, thinking back to that warm feeling of the time when he was still back in the village when melancholy suddenly hit him. That warm feeling was very valuable to him, as he knew that he would never be able to savor it again. And Lee placed his hand on his chest, using his fingers to grip the good luck charm that was in the leather pouch hanging around his neck. Whenever he was frustrated, he would only need to hold the good luck charm to calm himself down. But tonight, after holding it, his heart only got more and more flustered, and he was unable to calm down. He was unable to control his emotions because there was a depression in his heart, which in turn caused bizarre bodily reactions from Han Li. His blood started to surge as the qi in his body ran rampant. Qigong deviation. These two words appeared in his mind. Han Li stood up and drew in a huge breath, forcibly suppressing his chaotic state as he told himself to calm down. Now that Dr. Mo was away, he could only depend on himself to solve this crisis. He did not know why he was suffering from Qigong deviation, and his mind continued to ponder. Even though now was not the best time to question the reason, he still tried finding the root cause and cut the problem at its root, as it was the best way to recover from Qigong deviation. Han Li rotated his head as he surveyed his surroundings, but nothing seemed suspicious. He touched his chin with his right hand, and at the same time, his hand also knocked against something on his chest. Leather pouch, good luck charm. The names of these two items appeared in his mind. Could it be the good luck charm that caused the reaction? Han Li was not sure, but he had no time to hesitate now, as the condition of his body was getting worse, and there were signs that he would soon be unable to control the surging qi. Han Li tore the leather pouch off his neck decisively and flung it away from him. No, something is wrong. I feel even worse. The surge in my qi and blood is getting more violent. Han Li forcefully suppressed the surging qi as he stared at the leather pouch with his bloodshot eyes, hoping to find the reason why he had suffered more after he flung the pouch away.